Good evening. I will call this meeting of the Housing Authority of the City of Salem for Monday, September 28th, 2020 to order. If the recorder will please call the roll.
Vice Chair Kaiser.
Present.
Commissioner Anderson.
Likewise.
Commissioner Nanke.
Here.
Commissioner Leung.
Here.
Commissioner Osick.
Here.
Chair Hoy.
Here.
Commissioner Nordyke.
Here.
Commissioner Lewis.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I will now lead the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Councilor Kaiser, are there any additions or deletions to the agenda?
I have no additions or deletions to the agenda.
Thank you. And I see we have nobody signed up for public comment to the Housing Authority. Councilor Kaiser, the consent calendar.
Thank you. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
It's been moved by Councilor Kaiser, seconded by Councilor Nanke to approve the consent calendar. Details?
Thank you. So we have on the consent calendar item 3.1A, which are August 24th, 2020 draft SHA minutes. Resolution 3.3A, which is adoption of the fiscal year 2020-21 operating budgets and HUD certification. Item 3.3B, which is a revised Section 8 administrative plan and a resolution to adopt that plan. And that is it.
Thank you. Any further discussion? If the recorder will call the roll, please.
Pardon me. Commissioner Nordyke.
Aye.
Vice Chair Kaiser.
Aye.
Commissioner Lewis.
Aye.
Commissioner Anderson.
Aye.
Commissioner Nanke.
Aye.
Commissioner Leung.
Aye.
Commissioner Osick.
Aye.
Chair Hoy.
Aye. Motion passes. Thank you. We have no public hearings. We have no special orders of business. Information reports. I see that we have Ms. Utes here with us. Ms. Utes, welcome.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm Nicole Utes. I'm the Salem Housing Administrator. And tonight I am going to go ahead and start with some great news for the Housing Authority. Over the past week and a half, we have received several grant awards that you recently approved in past meetings. We were awarded a total of $135,000 from the HUD grants that we put in. That's three separate dollars: the CARES Act Extraordinary Circumstances application, the set aside portability funds, and the set aside for unforeseen circumstances. This is great news for us, and we'll probably be able to get, after one short phone call in the next month, we'll be able to start releasing some more vouchers into the community.
Thank you. That is excellent news. Could you do me a favor and just sort of say in plain English for the folks listening what that means?
Sure. So basically, with receiving these funds, our agency has been at max capacity at 97% occupied for our voucher program. With this additional award of these grants and these applications that the Housing Authority team put in, we have been able to receive this funding, and we will no longer be considered a shortfall agency, which means we didn't have the capacity to continue to lease up additional people into the community on vouchers because we had maxed out all of our funding for the year or early on. So this actually, $595,000 of this will cover the portability vouchers that we have, that we were issued here at Salem Housing Authority, but they maybe have ported out to places such as Hawaii, down in California, some other higher cost agencies that we're still paying for in this community. And so that $595,000 will cover all our portability vouchers and allow for that funding to come back into our community. On top of that, $82,000 of that was one apartment complex here in town that we received nearly 80 rent increases for a total of $82,000 in rent increases for this year. That was totally unforeseen on our part coming in our direction. And so this enables us to go ahead and cover those expenses without eating up additional funds for the voucher program and release again some more vouchers into the community. On top of that, our CARES Act extraordinary circumstances, we went through all of our program participants and were able to detail out exactly what the COVID-19 effects on our voucher program for additional costs and per unit usage. And they have awarded us an additional $1.8 million to help cover those expenses, but enable us to get back out there in the community and start releasing vouchers, which presently we've been on hold issuing any vouchers. There's been some in the queue. Those 50 we hope to get back out after we're released completely from our shortfall status with the Housing and Urban Development call that we'll have this month. And we'll be able to get those individuals out in the community with the vouchers. On top of that, it'll allow us to start using our domestic violence, getting some of those nominations back through, as well as putting, we actually have homeless rental assistance participants that should be graduated into the voucher program, but because we weren't able to issue them a voucher, have been sitting stagnant on that section. So we're hoping to get them graduated and into long-term stable housing. So all wonderful news. It's going to tremendously help. We're very excited, and the staff's ready to get going again and issuing vouchers.
That's fantastic news. A lot more, we're going to be able to house more people and prevent others from losing their housing due to financial difficulties given the current situation. So excellent work by you and your staff. Thank you so much for all of your amazing work to help folks here in Salem to be housed and to stay housed. So thank you.
Thank you. So,
are there any other questions from, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead, Ms. Utes.
Well, we do have one other good news that we were awarded as well. This last week, we were notified that we were chosen for the upcoming Oregon Supportive Housing Institute for the Permanent Supportive Housing for submission for the new Sequoia crossings. So our agency, along with, we applied with ARCHES and the Salem Housing Authority combined will go into the Institute, hoping that this better places us for future grant opportunities for another permanent supportive housing complex here in Salem.
That's excellent. Commissioner Anderson.
Thank you very much. Nicole, I just want to join with what Commissioner Hoy said. I'm sure the entire council is very happy for all this stuff. And please convey this to your staff. You and your staff are doing a terrific job. You know, affordable housing is one of our goals, and you are doing a great job in helping us achieve that goal. So thank you, and thanks to your staff.
Thank you.
Commissioner Leung.
Thank you, Director Utz, for the update specifically about what was going to be happening with the Sequoia crossing. Could you give us an idea how many units that will consist of eventually? And maybe however the timeline looks like at this point for when it might be ready?
Sure. So none of these processes from start to finish, they all take time. But this is definitely a good start, and it's going to push us in the right direction. And we're hoping with going through this institute that it may also expedite our ability to help get this done. We've actually been in development on this one and have some pre-development for a 78-unit apartment complex, which will consist of studio 1, 2s, and 3 bedrooms, which is a larger mix for the permanent supportive housing, which will enable us to also help those individuals, maybe our homeless families that are in cars, or other situations other than single individuals coming into the apartment complex. We have teamed up with the Housing Development Center, the Mid-Willamette Valley, the ARCHES program, very much similar to our Redwood crossings, in hopes that we can quickly come together as a team and get applications out there to get some funding for this project.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Ms. Utes, did you have anything further for us this evening?
No, the only other thing is I just wanted to see if there was any questions regarding the administrative plan, and if there were any concerns or any questions that you had The items that we had listed, I'm not sure they were, I want to ensure that you guys understand that those were done to help streamline the process for our applicants and enable more applicants to actually utilize the voucher program in a more expedient way with less grievance or burdens to try to maneuver through the system. So we are really hoping that our Section 8 landlord out there is going to be the one that's going to be doing the heavy burden of doing landlord screening for applicants. And this will enable individuals with vast criminal backgrounds to also be able to use the voucher program without having to go through numerous steps to get into the process.
Will you report back to us in the future on how that's going?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. That would be great. We'd like to kind of keep an eye on that and see if there's any help you need from us to make that better. So thank you for that. Anything else?
The only other thing that I was going to mention is Northgate in the rental assistance demonstration is part of one of our large construction projects. The Northgate of the 4 complexes is completely finished, all interior, exterior remodel, as well as it's 100% occupied. So we're getting very close on not only Northgate, but we're coming very close on Livingston Village as well. So nearing the completion of one half of that construction project, many new homes have been made available to the families that have moved in.
That's fantastic. Thank you so much. Anything else? All right. Seeing no further business before the Housing Authority, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
I call this meeting of the City of Salem Urban Renewal Agency for September 28th to order. If the recorder would please call a roll.
Board Member Kaiser,
Present.
Board Member Anderson,
Ditto.
Board Member Nanke,
Here.
Board Member Leung,
Here.
Board Member Osick,
Here.
Board Member Hoy,
Here.
Board Member Nordyke,
Here.
Board Member Lewis,
Here.
Chair Bennett.
Here. Right. Councilor Hoy, do we have any additions or deletions?
No.
Okay, we have no public comment. Calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second by Anderson.
Consent calendar includes item 3.1A, the September 14th, 2020 draft urban renewal agency minutes. Item 3.3A, revised Jory Apartments development agreement. And that concludes the consent agenda.
Mayor, I have a question about 3.3A, the Jory Apartments, if I could ask it now.
Certainly.
I sent an email to Director Rutherford with 2 basic questions about the agreement. One, it appears like amendments or changes to the agreement give a longer time period for them to perform under the agreement. So I asked her to speak about that. And the second one is, we've been going back and forth about what the percentage of housing, affordable housing could be penciled out there. And at one point, the goal was 20%, and then it moved back to 10%. And it sure looks to me like it's someplace between 20 or 10 and 20% now. So that's a good thing, but I would ask her to comment on both those issues. Thank you, sir.
Annie, are you handling this one?
Mayor, I'll go ahead and speak to this
Oh,
one.
there you are. I didn't see. I'm sorry, Kristen.
Oh, I'm Hanya. I was just hidden with all of the Brady Bunch faces here. Kristen, we're the third Urban Development Director. Yes, Councilor Anderson pointed out 2 of the changes with this development agreement. You are correct that we had initially talked about having 20% of the units be affordable units within this development. Then as construction costs increased, it looked like the number of units would go down to 10%, but as final bids came in, we were able to lock in and negotiate 15% of the units as affordable units. So that is good news for us. And then secondly, the extended feasibility time period is so that we can be very clear that The funds that we're providing as a property tax rebate are tied to the affordable units, and that it's not as a part of the development. So we want to make sure that we're distinguishing how the public funds are being used in this project for prevailing wage reasons. We are not funding construction. We are funding what happens after construction to incentivize getting those affordable units. And that helps us as well with the affordability of those units in the long run as well, by making sure that that we're distinguishing the two parts of this project, that this is a private sector project and our funds are to increase the affordability of housing stock within the community.
Very good. Councillor Anderson, is that?
It's a perfect response. Thank you, Director Rutherford.
You're welcome. And some additional news, it does look like we're still maybe starting grading this week.
Really?
We're fingers crossed, fingers crossed. We're getting very close.
Okay. Well, keep us posted. Would you send us all a note if that actually happens? That'd be pretty exciting.
We will.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Any other questions?
Board Member Leung,
Aye.
Board Member Anderson,
Aye.
Board Member Nanki,
Aye.
Board Member Kaiser,
Aye.
Board Member Osick,
Aye.
Board Member Hoy,
Aye.
Board Member Nordike,
Aye.
Board Member Lewis,
Aye.
Chair Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. I don't see any further business. Did you have any information reports, Ms. Rutherford?
No, we have nothing else tonight.
Okay, great. Then we are adjourned. I'll call this meeting of the Salem City Council for September 28th to order. Ask the recorder, please call the roll.
Counselor Kaiser,
Present.
Counselor Anderson,
Likewise.
Counselor Nanki,
Aye.
Counselor Leung,
Here.
Counselor Osick,
Here.
Counselor Hoy,
Here.
Counselor Nordike,
Here.
Counselor Lewis,
Here.
and Mayor Bennett.
Here. Additions or deletions, Councillor Hoy?
No.
Any councillor comments? Councillor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Kaiser and I recently met with a constituent who actually resides in Ward 7. This was after our last meeting. And the conversation that we had was very impactful on me. Afterward, I went home and typed out my thoughts, having reflected, excuse me, on the racism that this woman and her partner experienced regularly here in Salem. Excuse me. I hope it will help frame the important work that we have to do, the important work of rethinking our approach to public safety in Salem. There exists at least three kinds of racism. There's the one that is intentional, it is explicit. We know it and we can see it, as it's usually quite obvious, either through racist tropes, clothing worn, flags flown, or a variety of other signs. This racism is destructive and it undermines our country and our communities. It terrorizes people and it is wrong and it must be called out constantly. On Labor Day, we saw this kind of racism here in Salem at the Capitol Mall. It was obvious through racist tropes, clothing worn, flags that were flown, and violent behavior of racist individuals. It was wrong and I'm calling it out. It is not welcome here. People exhibiting this behavior are not welcome to terrorize our residents. The second kind of racism is much more subtle. It is not usually intentional. In fact, most of the time it's unconscious. This kind of racism is an implicit bias that manifests itself in our thinking through stereotypes that influence our understanding of situations and our decisions. It's the lens through which we each view the world. This implicit bias is also destructive. It undermines our country and our communities, and it terrorizes people. And it is wrong, and it must be called out constantly because we all must do better. I myself have been guilty of this kind of unconscious bias. I have worked hard to recognize it, own it, and do better, and continue to do so. And then there is systemic racism. Systemic racism is when the system, through rules, laws, informal processes, we stack the deck against groups of people. These are things like rules that exclude certain groups from residing in certain areas, or entrenched barriers that make living in certain areas impossible for certain groups. It can be the fact that, according to Time magazine, Black women are 3 to 4 times as likely as white women to die during childbirth, in part because of lack of access to quality health care. Systemic racism is destructive. It undermines our country and our communities. It terrorizes people, and it's wrong, and we must call it out constantly. Each of these forms of racism can and do exist in varying degrees throughout society and throughout our community. Yes, they exist right here in Salem. Whether it's in your home, your workplace, your government, or your police department, racism exists, and we need to call it out whenever we see it. People can have unconscious bias. That does not make them bad people. It means they have work to do. It means we have work to do. People with good intentions can and should strive to do better. And we as a city council must ensure that happens. And our system needs constant scrutiny so we can break down systemic racism. I am encouraged this is the time for real change, and this city council is ready to do our part. We have initiated an audit of the police department, and it will happen because we are reconsidering things we've asked the police to do that should never have been their responsibility. Things like mental health crises, homelessness, and other social services that were traditionally handled by other parts of the community. When all those services were defunded, the police were the only ones left, and they have stepped up to fill the gap. But it has put them in an untenable position. And now is the time to rethink that and to create a better system. All of this will be uncomfortable, but not because we are pointing fingers or telling people they are bad. It's because we are making a fundamental reset and we are going to do better. Now is not the time to pull back. It's the time to lean in, embrace this moment, and make the changes, however big or small they need to be. As James Baldwin said in the manuscript of his memoir, "Remember this house, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed unless it is faced. We will get through this, and we will be better as a city and as a community for it." Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Hoy. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilor Hoy. You're much more eloquent than I am, and I agree with everything you said. And I also wanted to talk about the very good conversation that Councilor Hoy and I had with this resident a few days ago about racism in our community, and about the role as both community members and elected officials that I wanted to share with everyone. This person that we talked to really challenged us to really listen to what the community is saying, and also to speak out and acknowledge, not just one time, not just 2 times, not just 3 times, but constantly, perpetually, to talk about racism and that it exists in Oregon and exists in Salem. It really does exist. It really does. Just like Councilor Hoy said, there's levels of it. And this council really needs to acknowledge that and say it over and over and over and over until we're just tired of saying it because we don't want to see it anymore. One point made by the person we met with that really struck with me is that even if I, as an elected official, have spoken out about racism, about condemning white supremacy, condemning violence committed towards Black, Indigenous, and people of color, that I need to continue to do that over and over and over, because I think you can get very complacent. You feel as an elected, I've done that, I don't need to do it again, but you really do. And that was really, really, that struck a chord with me, with her. And so that's what I'm doing tonight. And it's also because that doesn't mean the first time that I said it or the second or the third that everyone heard it, that there's new people, because new people are entering the conversation every day and they don't know that you said it. So I'm saying it here today that racism exists and that we as a council need to take very concrete actions to fight against it. I'm planning to take one of those actions at the next council meeting. I'll be releasing details later of the motion that I'll bring to council. But it's what I'm doing for my part to fight against racism in Salem.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Of course, I agree wholeheartedly with what Councilor Foy and Councilor Kazuz have said. we must continually do this, and we have been doing it, but we can't stop. We have to continue for the reasons that they said. I'd also want to point out that not much, some of this problem comes from the top, and it trickled by the top. I don't mean the top of our city, but the top of our nation, and it trickles down to us. And we have to fight that and continue to speak out against the intentional racism, I would say, that's coming from the top, as well as the unconscious and the institutional racism. This is a problem that has affected our state particularly since the sundown laws, since the fact that the state was originally organized as something for members of the white race only. And you look at the Ku Klux Klan, it was very active in this. So we have to continue to do this. And that's as a council, but as individuals, I would urge individual councilors and other people who are watching this meeting, if you see something like that, don't be afraid to speak out. We have to do, all have to do what we can.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Nordijk?
Good evening, folks. I completely agree with everything that my peers on council just said, so I won't reiterate those at that time. I would point out that one of the things that I'm looking forward to, in addition to the performance audit that is getting underway, and I appreciate council's support when I raised that to council in the first place, I can also say that I'm very happy to see that we have persons of color who will be on the steering committee to oversee that performance audit, because we know that racism is a part of our community. And I can't imagine carrying out this process without having persons of color and other persons representing vulnerable groups. For example, persons representing mental health, persons who are homeless. These folks need advocates and they need people to take a seat at the table. And so I'm delighted to see that we have a steering committee that includes these individuals. Now, in addition to that, I wanted to just remind folks that I have started doing monthly meetings for Ward 7 residents, and I encourage all of my Ward 7 residents to come to these meetings with their questions for me. And you can go to my Facebook page for more information, Salem City Councilor Vanessa Nordijk, to find out meeting times and so on. Two other points I want to make, because I know we have a very full agenda tonight. First of all, in Ward 7, we had a water main break that happened recently that impacted well over 1,000 customers. The city issued a boil water notice well within the 24-hour regulatory deadline. One of the things I've learned on city council is that there are layers and layers of rules. And one of them is that in situations like this, where you have a water main break, you have to notify residents, and you have to do so within 24 hours. And we notified folks within about 6 hours of the problem happening. Now, I've talked to city staff on how we can do even better in terms of getting that notice, because what some of my residents expressed concern about is that the water main breakage happened the night before, and the first time that they saw the notice was the following morning after they'd already brushed their teeth, brewed their coffee, washed their hair, etc. The good news is the boil water notice was merely a precaution, and we tested the water, and the water was just fine and is just fine. So I want to make sure people know that the water main is fixed and that the water is safe to drink. But I strategized with city staff afterwards on what we can do to even increase our level of notification in the community. And while we're talking behind the scenes, what some of those options might look like, for example, providing more information and a utility bill would be one possibility. But one thing I want to tell everyone in Salem is meet us halfway by opting in for emergency alerts. You can go to the city's website right now and sign up to get alerts emailed, texted, or called to you. This is not the last natural disaster that we've seen, these wildfires in the canyon. This is not the last flood that we've seen. Even though we do everything we can to keep our water safe, to keep our residents safe, the fact of the matter is we live in a valley, so flooding is going to happen sometimes, no matter how hard we work to reduce the risk of that. So please opt in to receive those notifications. Remember, it's tougher now because we don't live in a time where everyone has one home phone line for like 20 or 30 years, and everyone opens the same newspaper every morning. So those conventional approaches of getting information out are no longer as reliable because a lot of people like me, I haven't had a home phone line in, I don't know, 15, 20 years. So make sure you opt in to meet us halfway in meeting our goals for notifying people. The only other thing I would say before we get to our agenda tonight is that is what I'm doing to support our wildfire evacuation relief efforts. Many of us in Salem have strong ties to the Santiam Canyon. And so this weekend, I packed up bottled water, canned tuna fish, and brought along a crew of volunteers up the canyon to the Gates Community Church of Christ, where we helped sort and organize all kinds of donations. We saw a lot of persons there who were impacted by these wildfires firsthand. Families, men, women, and children who have lost everything. It was an experience that I will not soon forget. And I can tell you that when you visit the church up there, there was burn damage in 360 degrees around the church, almost as if a bell jar had come down and had been placed on top of the church. Thank goodness that there is at least a few public buildings still standing where people can amass donations, provide hot meals for evacuees and volunteers, and so on. I also continue my efforts working with the United Way. I recently worked with Daniel Isaacson from Eugene, Oregon. They had a community service organization down there, and I helped coordinate getting supplies up to the United Way Donation Center here in Salem. They brought 3 U-Haul trucks full of provisions for wildfire evacuees. Everything from mobility aids to diapers to pet supplies. So folks, we have to remember that this evacuation effort is ongoing and that right now some people can only take a few things because they don't have any place to stay yet. They're living in hotel rooms, they're couch surfing, they're scattered. But as people rebuild, they're going to need anything and everything you can think of. Everything from household supplies, clothing, and so on. So if you haven't already considered donating or volunteering your time to support the wildfire evacuation effort, please consider doing so. There's all kinds of great organizations out there. I've posted regularly on them. You can find them online pretty easily. Just be sure to watch for scammers because, of course, anytime there's a crisis, there are scammers out there who will pretend to be charitable donations, who will be more than happy to take your money and run with it. So please be sure to verify that you're donating to a reliable source. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Nanke?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple of quick sideline comments in regards to Councilor Nordike's comments. The canyon has suffered greatly, and we're working on helping people up there, making sure our water supply is adequate. And so, again, anyone who can help volunteer to provide assistance up there, greatly appreciated. In regards to the racism comments from previous counselors earlier, we are not inherently born with racism in our being. I grew up in a mixed race community, so I would just encourage people to be very conscious of your words and demeanor when people of different color, ethnicity, etc., come up in conversation, because we pass that along. And sometimes it just makes me wonder whether or not the more we talk about it, the more we continue it. But it is something that has to go into the history book. So be conscious of that. And then final point regarding homelessness, I had a conversation with Corey Poole from SEMCA again today. And in regards to the homeless in our parks, it appears that we are not upholding the rules that we set in place for people to be in those locations. They are in and close to the developed areas. They've been having significant issues with people cutting through their fences, cutting through their locks, stealing materials. And so, you know, I voted against continuance of the emergency declaration a couple of times. We need to figure this out because we are causing issues for people in specific geographic areas. And we have no clue how long this COVID piece is going to last. I know a lot of this is predicated on, you know, keeping people potentially off of downtown sidewalks and streets, but we are causing a significant burden and fear among large portions of our community, and some of those being very vulnerable. So I have a meeting with Manager Powers next week as well, and I'll be pulling that forward, but just want to make sure everybody's aware. We've been seeing more and more emails come through regarding issues and whether or not we can camp here or camp there. And it's disturbing to hear some of the stories that are out there and how that's affecting many of our residents' lives. Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's four things I just wanted to briefly touch upon. I guess I could go ahead and start off with kind of echoing a little bit of what Councilor Nanki has said specifically about our houseless community. We are seeing a large number of people who are becoming more houseless and unsheltered. And, you know, that is an alarming situation, specifically when we consider like who is our houseless and homeless folks. A lot of them are Salem residents. They are Salem residents because they're here in Salem. So how are we ensuring that we are providing them also with the safety measures that they need? Because, I mean, no one chooses to be homeless. I think that is something that we also need to remind ourselves, especially as we're trying to help the community. I mean, yes, they're currently in the parks, but, you know, winter is coming. What are we going to do this winter? How are we going to make sure that they are safe? I mean, it's going to start raining soon. It's going to be cold. You might get snow. I mean, I don't know. So, I mean, that's something to really consider as we move forward, moving with over the next few months. So to also echo on some of the things that the counselors have talked about regarding racism. So racism exists. It is ugly. It is pervasive, and it can be openly displayed or a discreet gesture. You know, it's happened to my family before, and I know it's happened to countless others. And it's ugly and it burns. And I highly recommend for people who have experienced it or believe they've experienced to reach out to the Human Rights Commission as one potential resource, because that's one resource that I was involved in when I first started with the city. And especially reach out to Gretchen Bennett if people have concerns to talk about. Second, I'd like to say a special thank you to Jonathan Jones, owner of Epilogue Restaurant and Cocktails. He organized a bake sale yesterday at Riverfront Park, and they were able to raise about $4,200 for the wildfire relief. And he was actually, he sent an email requesting potential places to donate the funds to. And I had recommended him whether to donate to Bakun to support our farm worker community, or even the Chush Fund for the water for Warm Spring tribes. But Jonathan is open to other suggestions as well. The last thing, and this might be more of a city staff question, census. It's been extended from my understanding to October now. And what is the city doing for the last month to try and ensure that people, that our residents, are filling out the census?
Mr. Powers, you want to help Councilor Leung on that one?
Yes, I'll have to. I'd like to provide a specific response, and I will provide that to council. Probably have that by the end of the week.
Great, thanks.
Generally, we've been coordinating with the county, coordinating with the census Bureau, but I do want to give a more specific response to the question. I'll have that for you by the end of the week.
Okay. Now, so I had the opportunity this weekend to meet with the mayors of Mill City, Gates, Detroit, plus our United States senators up in the Gates Mill City area to discuss federal as well as county commissioners, kind of a unified effort relative to the aftermath of the burn up there, and primarily shared our concern about the water supply, potential problems as a result of runoff. We were looking forward to and experiencing some rain, trying to keep track of that. We will continue to meet with our federal delegation as well as the county commissioners and the state of Oregon to continue to keep them well aware that we have 200,000 people on the drinking end of this water system, and we need to be extremely cautious, prepared, and begin really quickly the cleanup that's going to be necessary to protect this really vital water supply to the city. So we'll be continuing to work on that. I'm sure Mr. Powers will keep you informed as well of other city activities in this area. Mr. Powers. You want to go ahead, and you had a report. Did you want to make comment tonight?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Following up on the comments regarding the impacts in the canyon of the terrible wildfires, I would like Public Works Director Fernandez to provide a brief report update for you this evening regarding our focus on ensuring Salem's drinking water is safe and plentiful. So, Peter?
Yeah, thank you, Steve. Thank you, Mayor. First and foremost, our water continues to be absolutely safe to drink. Our biggest concern at this point after the fires is how much turbidity we're going to get, given that a very large amount of our watershed shows up on the burn maps. The initial rains that we had last week showed some turbidity, but nothing that the plant could not handle. We are prepared to handle a substantial amount of turbidity with the resources that we have available. So we're in good shape there. With respect to assisting the canyon and keeping an eye on what it all means to our water supply and the quality of our source water, we have assigned 3 public works staff members to the coordination efforts that are going on up there. We have 1 staffer that is specifically addressing the proposed wastewater, the sewer pipe and sewer plant process. That planning process has been underway for a while, and we understand may be accelerated now with the rebuilding efforts. And we have 2 other staff members that are looking at the water quality issues and making sure that all the cleanup is done appropriately, and anything that can be done to restrict runoff can be done as quickly as possible. So we're on that. And then finally, we stand ready to assist those communities with whatever assistance they may request. We have suggested that they apply for assistance through ORWARN, which is the mutual aid compact that Oregon utilities have. Being the largest water provider in this part of the state, we stand ready to assist those water entities as best we can if they request the help. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernandez. Councilor Nanke.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. In regards to water quality associated with the burns, I know we'd been working with the prediction lab, and there were issues with significant drawdown of the reservoir with phosphorus availability, but there was also the issue with amount of land area burned with this similar issue. Are they going to factor that in? I know we'll have the ozone system ready, which will hopefully protect us from that, but to at least look at the cyanotoxin effects based on that, that would be a data point that, once in a generation that may assist not only us, but other communities around the country and the world.
Right. So just to thank you, Councilor Nanke, just to fill in the knowledge base a little bit for the rest of the council. The Prediction Lab is a group of researchers that we've engaged from Oregon State University that assist us in doing modeling and projecting of cyanotoxins, algal blooms and cyanotoxins in the reservoir. We fully believe that the burns that occurred up in the mountains several years ago were a direct the algae blooms were a direct result of the ash that came down. And as there has been growth up there, as the mountains have recovered, we've seen less and less. So we absolutely believe that something's going on. That is something that I don't have a direct answer for you. I'll assume that the Prediction Lab will use that and will start to identify, all the areas, all the burned areas are well documented. So we can certainly start taking a look at that. And I personally am very concerned about what the future holds as that ash starts to erode into the reservoir, especially not so much into the river, because the river will just flow by, but into the reservoir combined with the warming water, that we'll get substantial algal bloom. So we'll know that certainly in the years to come. And yes, we will be ready with our ozone plant that is well underway. We only lost about a week because of the smoke, and we still expect it to be online by sometime in March of next year.
Excellent, thanks.
Okay, we'll move on then to public comment. This section gets 3 minutes. We'll start with Brett Stoner Osborne.
I'm sorry, Mayor Bennett, we never had that person sign in for this meeting today.
Oh, he's on my list. Okay. Shane Griggs.
Hi, Mayor Bennett and City Councilors. My name is Shane Griggs. I live at 3896 St. Andrews Loop in Salem, and I'm currently serving, forgot to start my timer, currently serving as president of your Salem Planning Commission. As you know, we serve as an advisory capacity to you on issues that will affect the growth and the orderly development of Salem. One of our responsibilities is to annually come back to you and tell you how we did in the prior year, which is served by your copy of the annual report and also by my verbal sharing with some of the highlights of that report. From that report, I'd like to note that we were a lot busier last year than we were the year before. We had 26 land use applications as compared to the prior year with 15. In addition, the Commission made recommendations on 4 code amendments to City Council. One that you might recall is the requirement for marked pedestrian paths. We said that at a minimum, we would want those painted. City Council upped the ante and indicated that paint should only be used in parking garages and that developers should use other more visible methods to make the pathways look like pathways. We also made recommended changes to the bicycle parking standards and several amendments to the design standards for multifamily housing. Also, some of the smaller infill developments are now permitted through an administrative approval process rather than coming to Planning Commission, which does help remove some of those barriers to new housing. We've seen adjustments to deviate from design standards such as locations of paths, windows, driveways, and setbacks. And we've seen that especially with the multifamily housing projects. 2 notable examples of design review cases are the new YMCA building and the Northwest Human Services building on Edgewater in West Salem. We also reviewed and approved the design of the new police station, yay Chief Moore, the new Union Gospel Mission Shelter, and the MAPS Credit Union building in North Downtown. The latter 3 are currently under construction. Although the bulk of our time is spent reviewing land use applications, we've had opportunities to engage in bigger picture work, such as our Salem project that we talked with you about last week. Many of us have participated in those stakeholder groups. We'll continue to do that as we move forward to a vision, a final vision, and a comprehensive plan that we hope will be adopted by you in 2021. In addition, implementation of House Bill 2001 is expected to begin in 2000, and hopefully we'll have some changes to the code to accommodate that. In conclusion, I had more to say, but I don't have the time. In conclusion, I'd like to recognize city staff of the Planning Division and Public Works for their excellent support at the commission. They truly are our North Stars. We work our way through a lot of these issues, and I'll accept your questions.
Does anyone have any questions? Yes, go ahead, Tom.
Thank you, Ms. Griggs. Thank you for the report, and thank you and the rest of the Planning Commission for the good work you've done for us. I read the report. A lot of good things are happening, and we look forward to more good things in the future in the areas you've been talking about.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to say I thought the our Salem joint work session with the Planning Commission and the City Council was fabulous. You have a lot of great members there, and there was good discussion and commentary as well. So I look forward to watching you in the future.
Thank you, Councilor Nanki.
Continue your progress.
Hopefully, yes. I think I'm off the hook and I can go eat supper.
Great. Thank you, Chain, very much for all the work you're doing, too.
You're very welcome. Bye-bye.
Okay, John Shepard.
Good evening, Councilors, Mayor. My name is John Shepard, and I'm a Ward 4 resident. I've submitted 2 documents to you regarding the decision for amending Salem Revised Code, Chapter 70, 71, and 601. They are submissions A and B, 24-hour design storm. The changes in this engrossed ordinance, Bill number 8-20, they feel like a magic trick. Approval recognizes the valuable service the Floodplain Management Department has accomplished in lowering the cost of flood insurance, and I concur and applaud this work. Then it suggests that there is more if we diddle a little with the Salem Revised Code. Drop a part of 71090, add a bit of 71095, stir in a pinch of newt and a whiff of green fog, and poof, Salem is now one of the elite 12 out of 1 million participating in FEMA's community rating system. We get a 35% discount on flood insurance. Who does not love a discount? Raise your hand. I'm with the residents who find discounts without value when a home, their home, is now in the path of coming floods. If you want real savings, if you want to protect Salem residents' lives and property, you must do the work. A first step, preserve the clause 71090B. I've given you good reasons for that in the document. Second, remove the 24-hour synthetic design storm from the code and replace it with a metric that works here in Salem and in the Pacific Northwest. I suggest a new metric, flow volume control limit, to protect residents. This metric also meets the objective of Public Works, which is stated in the SRC, protect the Salem storm conveyance system from damage. 3 minutes is too short of a time to address the complexity involved in this issue, and I'm pleased to answer any questions regarding the details of my submission. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, John. Councilor Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Shepard, for joining us this evening and providing information. Can you tell us a little bit more about the flow volume control limit and how it meets the Public Works guidelines that you had just mentioned?
I'd be pleased to. The 24-hour storm is a construct, a synthetic rainfall distribution idea. When I visited with the FEMA staff, because I was concerned maybe there's something in FEMA's CRS system that allows it to be recognized specifically, I learned there is nothing that is specific. It's better, or it is as it's the requirement for the city to demonstrate why they should be earning these CRS points towards a discount. The idea of flood control limits really stems from the way public works and engineers in asking for public works support of a project go to find out what are they going to do to control water flow into the streams. Before, in the 70s, we were required to put everything into the streams. Now, with what works have been done, we are trying to limit the volume of water that's flowing into the streams, at least to some extent, where the extent is based upon this fictitious 24-hour design. What we really are trying to do is control the flow so that it stays with, the water stays within the boundaries of the conveyance system. That's really the object. And if we use a limit based upon what we're trying to do, it just makes a whole lot more sense.
Thank you, John. Anyone else? Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Shepard, I appreciate all the hard work you've done here. I think, unfortunately, for much of the council, we haven't had time to review exactly what you said in your submission. It's very complex and hard. So I'm hearkening back to an issue we had a couple meetings ago about some transportation planning issues and traffic flow issues. And we had someone who had some expertise on that. So I'm just curious as to what is your area of expertise here? You are clearly knowledgeable and up on things, but do you have any training or background in water management or anything else?
Great question. My background has been to run a company for the last 30 years in milk management. I do a lot of flow control decisions that are related to, or had input in those decisions that are related to the amount of milk we're pushing through a plant to get to the bottles you drink. My original college education started as a geologist at Colorado School of Mines. I found that business was more my type, and I left that career, or that's what I study, and started on financial management. And I spent about 15 years doing financial management. About 2007, because neighbors were worried about getting flooded, and they worried about the Battle Creek property, which was a great basin for collection. As a geology background, I could see it. We started to become more knowledgeable specifically about the watershed of the Battle Creek Basin. I served for the city of Salem as the assistant chair for the Mill Creek Watershed Council when it did exist. And I actually participated with Mr. Nanke on a couple of city committees regarding watershed management, which I learned a lot from him about how to talk to you guys. And so my background is not as scientific as Mr. Chandler's. I don't have a doctorate in this area, but I have worked with a lot of knowledge to build a base of understanding of this particular basin. And I do some things like I advise individuals in the boating world as to the risks of hurricanes in the Atlantic, which has become a new career for me as a retiree, or at least I believe I am. And it just dovetails with my sailing activities for my career.
One follow-up, if I could, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
Again, these are quite detailed documents you presented us. I'm wondering, I remember there was something at the last meeting and something about some private for-profit company that is putting out models, and the Public Works Department responded to that. I'm wondering if these other issues that you're raising in the two memorandum.
Tom, we're having trouble with your sound.
Okay. I'm speaking closer. Is that better?
That is better. Thank you.
Okay. People don't normally have trouble hearing me. It's just the opposite.
Breaking up is what's happening.
Okay. My question is, have you discussed the material you presented us tonight with the Public Works folks who are in charge of this project? And secondary question is just to alert the Public Works staff that if they can, I'd like some sort of response to these issues when we get to the time to accept the report. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
On Monday, I had an hour discussion this last week a week ago, this Monday, with Mr. Chandler. And I discussed the subject areas with him about stormwater, the ideas of design storms, the concepts of continuous flow management, which appears to be one of the future look ways that communities are dealing with water flow of their stormwater. And after he suggested that I should talk with our flood manager, who I know from my meetings with the flood management committee, Mr. Davis, and we did. We spent an hour and a half discussing the details of the flood issues, the FEMA program, the program that he's been championing, and as I told him I would do, I am 100% in the work he's done to champion this project. From those two meetings and from the discussions that I had with FEMA regarding specifically to look at the CRS points that relate to the claimed statement, we need to have this because FEMA is going to recognize it. I was looking for specific language in FEMA that would say, yes, this is our standard. This is what we're looking for. You have it, you get the points. And there is none. That's what shocked me about the discussion about the FEMA CRS need to have the use of this 24-hour problem. And when I said, okay, if you look at a problem and you have an answer and the answer doesn't solve the problem, you got to look for another answer. And looking at it from a discussion I had with an engineer about flood management out of Mississippi, we talked about the idea of, well, in Mississippi, we look about how much flow is coming down the river. That's an area that floods a lot. And that's how that's the way they approach the direction. And that gave me a clue that said, hey, we could probably do that because we are measuring and we have records for flow in our creek.
Okay.
Then I looked at the new plan from the Stormwater Master Plan, and I saw that is the first time Public Works has had hard data to support the ideas that we're talking about.
Great. Thank you, John.
I'm sorry, sir. Didn't mean to take
No, it's all very interesting. And we'll also have Mr. Chandler and Mr. Davis here also to talk a little about it. It is a fascinating subject.
It's engaging,
Awesome.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, John, for the kind words. It's been great working with you over the years. I'm assuming you want your testimony to be included in the public hearing regarding the Stormwater Master Plan. We're in public comment right now, are we not?
Yes, sir, we are in public comment, it's my understanding, and I have asked to speak at the Stormwater Master Plan public hearing.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that
language isn't related to that. This is related to what we talked about on the 14th meeting, and then what you have to deal with as a decision-making group later tonight.
Right.
Right. I just wanted to make sure that you weren't of the perception that this was testimony for that public hearing. So
okay, this is strictly related to the clauses that you have available in front of you, and I support a portion of those recommended changes, specifically dealing with the flood management area. But the clauses that I've identified, you're not going to get, the dog won't hunt.
Hey, let's put that dog in the house. Move on to the next. Well, we'll hear from you again, John.
My pleasure, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on then to the consent calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move approval of the consent calendar.
Second.
Second by Kaiser.
Consent calendar consists of item 3.1A, September 14th, 2020 draft city council minutes. Item 3.2A, authorizing a transfer of fiscal year 2021 Willamette Valley Communications Center Fund budget appropriations. Item 3.3A, sale of 3 acres of city-owned land at the Salem Business Campus to Tim Bush. Item 3.3B, intergovernmental agreement with the Drug Enforcement Administration for Narcotics Task Force operations. Item 3.3C, sale of property at Salem Business Campus to Peninsula Truck Lines Incorporated and authorizing street improvements. And that concludes the consent calendar.
All righty. Any discussion? recorder would please call the roll.
Counselor Kaiser,
Aye.
Counselor Anderson,
Aye.
Counselor Nanki,
Aye.
Counselor Leung,
Aye.
Counselor Osick,
Aye.
Counselor Hoy,
Aye.
Counselor Nordike,
Aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. We'll go then to the public hearing, amending Salem Stormwater Master Plan. Watch this one.
Okay, the City Council will now hold a public hearing for the purpose of hearing testimony regarding an amendment to Salem Stormwater Master Plan. The criteria applicable to the proposed amendments are SRC 64.020F1A and B. Testimony must be directed toward the identified criteria or other criteria the person believes to apply to the decision. The hearing will be conducted with the staff presentation first, followed by other interested persons. Neighborhood associations are limited to 5 minutes per association, and individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes.
Chandler, are you our leadoff person here?
I am, Mr. Mayor. I was waiting for Glenn to get the presentation up and ready.
Looks great.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and City Councilors. I am Robert Chandler, the Assistant Director of Public Works here in Salem. With me this evening is Mr. Glenn Davis, our Chief Development Engineer, and Mr. Hans Hadley of West Consultants. And on behalf of the many members of the city's professional staff, our consultant team, the advisory committee, and the many, many members of the Salem community who have contributed to this effort, it is our pleasure to bring to council this amendment to the City of Salem Stormwater Master Plan. So what you have before you is a complete replacement of the current Stormwater Master Plan that was adopted by City Council 20 years ago. I will make just 3 brief points. First, the Stormwater Master Plan neither raises revenue nor does it enact regulations. Rather, at its core, the Stormwater Master Plan establishes policies and it identifies a set of capital projects organized by stormwater basin, those that are needed to lower the risks of flooding. Second, the Stormwater Master Plan is but one of many components of the city's comprehensive suite of stormwater programs. On pages 8 and 9 of your staff report, we list, I think, 19 different elements that illustrate how the city addresses the many issues related to urban stormwater runoff. And lastly, there's more to come. Once this Stormwater Master Plan is adopted, Public Works, working with an advisory committee, will use the policies and the projects in the Stormwater Master Plan, and we'll update the Stormwater Systems Development Charge, SDC methodology for stormwater, bring that back to council. And along with that, we'll have an updated list of those projects eligible for SDC funding, otherwise known as the 309 list. And we'll also be coming back to council with updates on the next set of basin plans. So with that introduction, I will turn over the remainder of the presentation to Mr. Glenn Davis, and we'll be standing by to answer any questions from council after public testimony has been received.
Thank you. Sure. Mr. Davis?
Okay, so there's a lot to cover in this presentation, so I'm going to start with an overview. I'll open with an introduction to the Stormwater Master Plan by providing some context to the plan itself. First, I'll describe a background of flooding in Salem, and then I'll spend most of the overview describing Salem's programmatic approach to floodplain and stormwater management. And these programs are all part of the regulatory landscape that surround the master plan itself. So the foundational premise of Salem's Stormwater Master Plan is a sense of being realistic. So the major premise is shown here in pictures. So here you see an undeveloped Willamette River Valley from 1847. And one can't start with a picture of that natural river valley and replace it with a major metropolitan area and not irrevocably alter how landscape responds to rainfall. So the Stormwater Master Plan takes a realistic view of what we can accomplish with the resources that are available to us. So to be realistic, it's important to note that flooding has repeatedly occurred in Salem's history, and flooding will continue to happen long into the future. So well before Salem became urbanized, long after, Salem's been a consistent pattern of flood events. So we can't stop all flooding, but we can improve how stormwater and flooding is managed. So the Stormwater Master Plan is one of many endeavors that Salem uses to manage stormwater and flooding. And it's important to note that flooding and stormwater are separate and distinct regulatory programs, but they do overlap quite a bit. So first, I'll emphasize our floodplain management plans and programs. The primary characteristic of floodplain management is its connection to the National Flood Insurance Program, administered by FEMA. The flood insurance and disaster relief are federal programs that require implementation at the local level. And then to illustrate the success of Salem's floodplain management programs, I'll describe Salem's participation in FEMA's Community Rating System, or CRS. So CRS is a voluntary federal program that encourages local communities to do more than the minimum federal requirements. And CRS ratings are scored from 9 to 1, with 1 being best. And Salem entered the program as a Class 8 in 2008. And the flood insurance premiums were discounts were 10% with that initial joining. And then today we're only one of 4 cities in Oregon that have obtained to the Class 5 level. And if all goes well, we're scheduled to reach Class 4 in the next fiscal year, in this fiscal year, and then Class 3 in the next fiscal year. And that would put the Class 3 rating would put Salem among the top 15 of 22,000 communities. I think Mr. Shepherd said 1 million. That was a little bit high. So I use this slide to demonstrate that Salem really has an excellent floodplain management program, and we keep trying to make it better. So one key to a success of the Salem floodplain management program is its floodplain management plan. The original plan that we had included 41 action items. And the key for Salem is that this plan doesn't just sit on the shelf and gather dust. The 41 action items involve a wide range of actions, from preventive activities to public information. And as of the second annual review, Salem had completed 30 of its 41 action items, either being complete or ongoing. And that plan's guided the success of our CRS program. So planning makes a difference, but only if you do the plan. And I mentioned that stormwater and floodplain have some overlap to them. And here's one example of Salem's flood warning system. Those bridges those 2 programs because it has a combination of weather reports, rainfall distribution, stream gauge data that can predict potential flooding along Mill Creek. We have a website where interested citizens can track flooding. And Salem also has an emergency alert system, as you heard earlier today, where residents who are at an increased risk of flooding can be warned well before it happens. Here's actually a picture of the flood warning system website. The graph on top shows user access that occurred during an actual flood event. And the lower graph shows the actual flood levels during that event. So you can demonstrate that the website's helping to get information to the people who need it during flood events. So it's quite successful. So next, sorry about that. Excuse me. I'll describe the Salem's stormwater programs. The Stormwater Master Plan is what we're talking about tonight, and that emphasizes capital construction projects that can reduce flooding. Salem also has what's called a Stormwater Management Plan, which includes 66 different best management practices that improve water quality and reduce flooding. Salem has a team of operations staff that clean pipes and ditches and keep them free from debris. And we also have development codes and standards that ensure that new impervious surface are treated through low impact development techniques to improve water quality and reduce flooding. So now that we've laid the groundwork regarding the overall programs, let's now look briefly at an overview of the master plan itself. So what a stormwater master plan can do is reduce risks of flooding from stormwater runoff by analyzing current conditions and then planning ahead by looking at future conditions when the urban growth boundary is fully developed. So the Stormwater Master Plan lays out a strategy for reducing those risks of flooding. So on the screen is an overview of the master plan elements. The introduction and overview cover much of what the background topics I've discussed already. I'm going to spend most of the time in this presentation emphasizing the goals and policies and the basin plan. So here you can see a map of Salem and its 12 stormwater basins. Each of these basins has a distinct watershed with its own unique characteristics. The master plan updates organizes these three basins into three main categories: those unstudied, those studied, and those targeted for future study. So our first category is those unstudied. 3 of the 12 basins have limited development and therefore don't require detailed analysis or major construction. These are both influenced, Willamette and Pettijohn are influenced much by Willamette River, and Lower Claggett is a small basin near Kaiser. Our next category is those studied. 3 basins are the primary emphasis of this 2020 master plan update. It includes a completely new analysis for Battle Creek and Mill Creek and Pringle Creek. And these basins have been analyzed with state-of-the-art technology, and I'll explain that in a few moments. And the third category of stormwater basins is those targeted for future study. The remaining 6 stormwater basins were studied as part of the 2000 master plan, and that 20-year-old technology is still valid today. It's still included in the current plan, but one policy is to complete those individually over time to keep up with development patterns and technology. And we intend to do those using the same state-of-the-art analysis over the next several years in the sequence shown on the screen. So the master plan includes a variety of citywide policies intended to improve water quality and reduce peak runoffs that cause flooding. There are many aspects of stormwater and floodplain management that are being coordinated as part of this effort. So I'll briefly highlight a sampling of policies and assumptions that have guided the preparation of this plan. First, Oregon law establishes development rights within the urban growth boundary. So there are existing state laws that allow land within the UGB to be used and developed. And so the Stormwater Master Plan update does not attempt to establish new regulations. Next, the plan maximizes cost-effective solutions that are realistic for Salem and estimates their total cost. However, the plan does not generate new revenues. The projects and programs of this plan are selected in part because they can reduce the risk of flood damage to life and property and the environment. Another key feature of the plan is not to move flooding problems downstream, but instead attempt to control runoff and limit downstream flows upstream. And lastly, the master plan is designed to update and plan for stormwater basins individually and not all at once, as I just described earlier. So next, I'm going to highlight a couple specific examples of policies in the master plan. Policy 3.6 states the city will make readily available information related to flooding. And this policy is important because there are flood insurance maps published by the federal government that are used for establishing flood insurance premiums. However, the master plan has state-of-the-art information that's not exactly the same as those federal maps. So this policy ensures that property owners, tenants, home builders, potential buyers of floodplain properties have all the information they need to make the decisions about flood risks when buying or selling property, buying flood insurance, or developing. Another policy is 8.1 regarding stormwater system development charges, or SDCs. Just a couple years ago, Salem went through a long process of updating its SDC methodologies. The methodology in 2019 was for stormwater was virtually unchanged from the original methodology because the master plan had not been adopted yet. So this policy implements many of the lessons and decisions made as part of that methodology adoption process a few years ago. And the primary features of the methodologies include maximizing flexibility, minimizing complexity, and having a cost structure that's commensurate with historic non-SDC expenditures. So the goal is that developers pay their fair share, and those revenues can be used where needed to mitigate the negative costs of growth. So in closing, the Stormwater Master Plan is created as a tool to reduce the risks of flooding. It is a never-ending, ongoing process that needs to be tackled with a variety of approaches. The Master Plan updates include new state-of-the-art analysis of 3 of the 12 stormwater basins, 6 more plans to come. There's 243 projects in the plan that will be included in the city's ongoing capital improvement plan, as funding is available and the policy and the plan will help guide the city's decision-making in stormwater management for years to come. So that concludes my presentation, and I'm available for questions.
Very good, Mr. Davis. We'll call on members of the public and then we'll be back to you, I'm sure. Thank you. John Shepard.
Mr. Mayor, Council, John Shepard, I'm Ward 4. I'm a Salem resident. I want to congratulate Mr. Chandler and Mr. Davis and the Public Works employees and the team that put this program together. I've been working in this area with the City of Salem team since 2007. And it is my estimation that this is the best document they have produced in my experience. It is based upon hard data that was used to develop the understanding of our basins. And it does an excellent job of identifying the problems we've been having in the Battle Creek Basin. Specifically, it brought to my light, my understanding, the difference between a 24-hour storm and the two storms that we have, the 1996 and the 2012 storm, that clearly produced a whole lot more water that we saw as residents. And their graph in the appendix helps to understand why. And they're based upon 100-year events. So I think that this is an excellent tool to help guide the council to establish any regulations that will be needed, but they're going to do it with good evidence. And I'm really pleased to see the quality of this program that was put together. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any questions? All right. Thank you, John, very much. E.M. Easterly. Okay, Glenn Bailey.
Yeah, just a second here.
Sure.
Yes, I do congratulate the city staff on the stormwater master plan. And I'm sorry, my name's Glenn Bailey. I live at 1347 Spyglass Court. I'm the chair of the South Gateway Neighborhood Association. As I said, we congratulate the staff on this plan. We were very pleased that this was done. We do have several questions, and some of these may kind of spill over to the issue of the code. First of all, the plan, though it's very good in regards to detention, it doesn't talk about retention in new projects, new development projects, especially those that are upstream. This is especially important with the Battle Creek Basin because so much of our flooding is caused by development in the upper streams. So we felt that, this really needs to be addressed, and that the city council should consider working with the staff or instructing the staff to develop a special development zone within the Battle Creek Basin that would help greater retention of water in the new development in the hills to prevent more detention required downstream. The second thing, and this again, John Shepard has addressed this, is the need for not to use a 24-hour synthetic design storm as a basis for a metric within the code, and more so to use those similar to what happened in 1996 and in 2012. One which was a 48-hour storm and another which was a 72-hour storm. Overall, we applaud the plan, but we do think these issues of special development and UDC code changes that would promote retention should be addressed, and as well as the issue of what metric you use as a basis for storms. That's all we really have to say on that.
Great, thank you very much, Glenn. Any questions for Mr. Bailey? All right, any questions for staff?
Mayor, I'm sorry, this is Courtney. I just wanted to let you know that EM Easterly has rejoined the meeting and we're going to try to get him prepared for speaking to the council.
Well, we will stand down for a minute then. Okay, EM.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My computer died on me.
Tell us who you
Mayor
are. Have at us.
Mayor Bennett, members of council, I'm EM Easterly, Ward 8. I am testifying in support of the draft Stormwater Master Plan, but first, I wish to take a moment to thank City Manager Powers and the Assistant Public Works Director Chandler for their courteous willingness to address most of my queries. I support the Stormwater Master Plan for 4 reasons. 1, it replaces a 20-year-old document adopted before Salem had stormwater utility rate fees. 2, it relieves reliance upon SDC monies to fund stormwater monitoring, habit improvement, or quality facilities. 3, that means more stormwater SDC funds may be focused upon eligible stormwater capital improvement projects. And my 4th point, the plan sets a course that will allow Salem to establish development standards which protect downstream property owners from potential upstream development impacts. However, there is an element of the plan that needs refinement. Specifically, I ask that the plan include the creation of an oversight committee to monitor the 5% small conveyance allocation expenditures used to increase stormwater conveyance capacity. Details are offered in my September 23rd written testimony. This vetting process would affirm the SDC expenditures are focused upon the adopted capital projects within the guidelines of the Salem Stormwater Master Plan. Such a program would provide important connections with watershed councils, would facilitate increased transparency, would reveal to city councilors insights to aid in their decision-making. There is a precedence for this ask. The Planning Commission vets land use proposals. The Parks Board vets park proposals. Both are committed to transparent governance and support of City Council as the final decision maker. I again ask that you add a 6th item to policy 8.1. Quote, number 6, establish an expenditure review committee to vet and advise council on staff recommendations to expend, quote, stormwater unspecified, unquote, SDC
Time's up,
fund.
EM. I'm sorry, your time is up. Thank you very much.
You are welcome. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. All right, this is our chance to ask questions of city staff. Courtney, I've got a problem here showing up with your name and only 2.
So that might be the speaker view. I'll ask, I'll see if IT can correct it. Just a moment.
Okay.
You're going to have to select up on the upper right-hand corner and change your view to gallery view.
Okay. Right. Yes, Councilor Leo. This is a chance to talk to staff.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I had a question for staff, actually, and it was a recommendation that EM Easterly had emailed and actually spoke about today, the SDC Fund Oversight Committee to What is the staff decision on why we can't have an oversight committee considering the amount of funds in question here?
So, Mr. Mayor, I'll get a start on that. What I recommend is you wait until we finish coming back to council with the updated SDC methodology for stormwater. And then council can consider whether we need a citizen oversight committee or expenditure review committee. Because if you need one for stormwater, you might need one also for all 4 other lines of business. Right now, there are several oversights for spending. I would not recommend engaging in that right now, Councilor.
Okay. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I really extensively looked at Mill Creek and Pringle Creek because those are ones in my ward. And I first have to say, I agree with the various people who testified. This is a thorough, detailed report. I really appreciated all the information you gave. I would note that just in those 2 creek basins, it looks like it's going to cost about $1.5 million per year for just maintenance of the projects, the capital improvement projects. And I didn't segregate the capital improvement programs for those 2. So I know the figure was $330 million. First of all, I don't know if that's just for the 3 basins that were discussed or all 12 basins. So I'd like I understand SDCs, having been the chair of that committee for 18 months, but I'd like a little discussion about how we expect to get the money for the capital improvements and then how we expect to have the money to maintain, if only 2 of them are 1.5 million, the others are going to, I'm sure, increase to greater numbers. Thanks.
Sure. So to begin with, the $330 million is for all basins, all projects. When I say 243 projects, it's not just for Mill Creek or Pringle Creek. And that is an estimate that includes trying to bring estimates made 20 years ago into we use 2019 dollars. So that's where that number came from. There's some places where we estimated the cost to maintain some of those facilities. That was in the 3 more recent basin plans. The cost for maintaining stormwater facilities, like the cost for maintaining all of our other facilities, comes out of utility rates, not capital projects, and certainly not SDCs. I couldn't tell you where all the money is going to come from. We have a stormwater utility now that we did not have 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago. That's where it is. Also, that $330 million is all projects, all basins over a very long period of time. In some ways, some of those projects are very significant and would probably require a bond measure in order to actually proceed with that. Peter, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, if I could, Mayor. Councilor, all master plans are aspirational. They all include projects that, cover 20 years worth of work. There is no way that the community can afford every project and every master plan, but it is important to show them. And then from there, we select what is SDC eligible, what might be a good project for rate funding as we address things that need to be done. But there's no way that we'll do $330 million worth of stormwater projects. Like there's no way we'll do X number 100 millions in parks or transportation or anything else. But there is a huge need.
One follow-up, Mr. Mayor, please.
Yes.
I understand that, and I appreciate that. I just want to make sure the public understands that. One of the things you've done is prioritize the various projects in the basins of short-term, medium-term, and long-term. I may not be using the right words, but you understand what I mean. How did you get to the priority, and what sort of criteria did you use to prioritize the various projects?
I think part of the priorities were carried forward, of course, from the 2000 master plan that had similar language, and from the added projects that were a result of the analysis done by our consultants. They're the ones that identify projects that could probably do the most good, provide the most benefits for relatively lower cost in the near term. That was basically how it was done. At this moment, again, it's aspirational. It's a list of total projects. It has not gone through our CIP selection criteria, which gives you this quasi-numeric rating. That's where we got the council.
Mr. Chandler, I've been a real supporter of this the entire time I've been on the council and as mayor. I think this is just one of the real sort of underappreciated pieces of work that you and Mr. Davis have been doing. It's quite amazing. But the one I followed it very closely on the Mill Creek, as well as its relationship with Pringle and then into Battle Creek, and kind of explain to me how we're addressing that Battle Creek feeder coming down into the downtown area. That's where I've seen the most, kind of the most devastating problems when we've had these big floods.
Yes, sir. I agree. Our creeks are intriguingly interrelated. I will call Hans Hadley, who is on assignment in Fargo, North Dakota at the moment, but he was involved with all the modeling. And Hans, can you help answer some of the mayor's questions about the interrelationships among the creeks?
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, so you're correct. Absolutely, they are all interrelated. The interesting thing about Battle Creek is, you know, it starts in Salem and it flows down and into Turner and then back into Mill Creek.
So we flood Turner and onto Mill Creek. Is that the problem?
Well, the one thing that you got to keep in mind is that a lot of times when storms happen, they move over the basins, and so the peaks of the flow and the runoff from each basin occur at different times, and so we can get a high flow in Battle Creek that runs off, and then hours or even a day later, you might get large flows in Mill Creek coming down. So there is a timing difference. So you can have actually multiple peaks during a storm event just because of where the water is coming from. But definitely in Battle Creek, we were looking at you know, what's the current flood risk within the basin itself, where are people affected, and then what can we do within Battle Creek itself to help solve those issues, but at the same time not create additional issues downstream. So I mean, classic stormwater master planning from back in the day was to increase conveyance, put in bigger pipes, dig bigger ditches, do the things that you need to do to reduce the flood risk locally. Well, what we found by doing that is they were sending more water downstream and causing impacts downstream. And downstream happens to be, again, the city of Salem. So you're dealing with it in another location. So what we tried to do was create a plan within the Battle Creek Basin that solved the issues in that basin, or at least helped solve the issues in that basin without creating additional issues downstream of Battle Creek.
Did you hear Mr. Bailey's testimony from South Gateway talking about the retention and along with conveyance, but really retention of upstream water? What's wrong with that approach at this point?
Well, I mean, one thing to make a little more clear is just the lingo. Retention and detention are two different things.
I may have used the wrong term.
No, he used the word retention. You know, retention is basically you are trying to keep the runoff on site. You're trying to hold it and infiltrate it into the ground. And that's what the green infrastructure that the city has implemented to try to have developers use as much as possible to infiltrate as much runoff as possible. That's the retention piece of it. Then there's the detention piece where you're actually storing the water in a detention basin and slowly letting it come out over time, so we reduce the peak discharge downstream. So those are the two different aspects of that. But one thing to keep in mind with the planning that the basin plan, we did look at future full build out conditions where we basically said, okay, what if the entire basin within the UGB was built out based on the current zoning criteria? What would be the additional increase in runoff associated with that? And how would that impact downstream properties? And would these projects, these capital improvement projects that we're proposing, would they help also solve the problem? We don't want to design something that fixes the current issue, but then 20 years or 30 years from now isn't working anymore because we didn't account for that future build out. But in this case, for all of these basins, we did look at future full build-out conditions to understand that these projects, if implemented, would not only help today, but would help in the future as well.
Well, do we see a resolution then up in that Battle Creek area? They get a sort of the annual flood up there, or down there, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the big issue is right around the old golf course, you know, the property that the city purchased. Just upstream from there, there's a lot of
detention basin, I thought at one time.
It is a detention basin, yes. So there is one of the projects that we are proposing is to create some additional detention, and that project was kind of combined with a parks master plan for that location.
Right.
And so, you know, we wanted that detention in that basin is not to solve the flooding downstream of that basin. It's actually to help offset or mitigate the upstream projects that we'd like to do. We'd like to do some projects where we're improving the conveyance in the channel and trying not to get the water to overflow and flow through the neighborhoods. Well, by solving that problem, we're creating more runoff downstream. So these detention facility that we are proposing for the park is to help offset that. And like I said earlier, not cause problems downstream in Turner and then subsequently the city of Salem again.
So we have a 72-hour event. Well, we see flooding in Salem, you know, there along State into Ward 1, into Councilor Kaiser's ward. That seemed to be one of the areas really hit by those big events.
Yeah, well, you can have any event of any duration and it can cause certain impacts. You can have a very short duration event that's only a few hours long, but if the rainfall is really intense, you can get local flooding, right? You can get storm drains that are clogged and you get street flooding. Or you get the larger floods like we've modeled in our basin plan, the 48-hour, the 72-hour storm events. You know, that 48-hour event is kind of the magic one that we found that's created the greatest flood risk in these basins. And so that's what we're using as our synthetic storm event to evaluate the impacts of the rainfall.
What's and I know you've got your colleagues here with you as well. What's wrong with Mr. Shepard's proposal of how to scale these or describe these events and deal with them?
Well, I honestly would have to talk to Mr. Shepard a little bit more because I wasn't quite following the logic that he had. But I would certainly be happy to have a phone call or discussion with him to talk more about it.
Okay.
Mayor, I can add just a little bit more about that. What Mr. Shepard is interested in, and others, is can you use a longer duration storm event to better design stormwater facilities on as a result of development?
Right.
And the answer is, I don't know. Modeling can give you an idea of what might happen based if all the model caveats and all the model assumptions work. I will say that a 24-hour storm event is commonly used certainly around the country. I don't know whether a longer storm event would actually be worth the added work. I have been involved with a jurisdiction, well, it was state mandated in Washington state to go not from a 24-hour to a 48 or 72, but Washington state developed a continuous model, continuous input, 50 years of rainfall data. That took hundreds of thousands of dollars of investment, had to be done at the state level and mandated. So it's a lot more than just changing a definition that we've got.
You all mentioned that this can be changed over time. I think Glenn mentioned it, that this can be adjusted and changed. Are we nimble enough that as the study of these kinds of events and how they're handled, are we nimble enough to be able to respond to those and change this plan if we need to, if more information becomes available, better data is available, new ideas are available in stormwater management, flood management?
Absolutely. And
okay.
We even incorporate some of that in our policies that we're open to other ideas, modeling and otherwise. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Councilor Leung.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I still have some major concerns, specifically since, as we've talked about repeatedly, like we had the flood in 1996 and 2012, both at the time, Mr. Mayor, I think you were still a city councilor for Ward 1, and Councilor Ananke, you were a councilor at that time too for both of those flooding situations. And I really feel like we're not taking in consideration the impact of the floods, how it impacted, especially wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, which is pretty much half the city, not counting the impact that it resulted in Turner. And I mean, it also sounds like there were some conversations that were supposed to happen with Mr. Shepherd, and it sounds like some did, but not enough. And my understanding from our last city council meeting was that from 2 weeks ago now, my understanding was that there was going to be more discussions between staff and Mr. Shepherd, and I'm not hearing that based on what we've been discussing so far. And I'm really concerned that if we move forward with this, that we're making a decision that is not informed.
Well, but the disagreement, if I understood it, was over the 24-hour model and the continuous, I can't remember the term, but is that where that seemed to be the only discrepancy that I heard?
That was one of them, the 24-hour model situation. Like, why are we utilizing that model in particular? When we're taking consideration like how Oregon rain is very different than, let's say, like Houston, Texas, or even like Phoenix, Arizona. I mean, in Oregon, we could have like what supposedly is going to be a major rainstorm. It only ends up being a few drips, or we end up having something completely opposite, right? Because I mean, that's why we never carry umbrellas with us for that reason. But I mean, that is one area that I'm concerned about, but considering like the impact that this would potentially have on wards, again, 1 through 4, which is half our city. And the other one for my...
All these years, this has been a steady project, and this is really the first comprehensive look at a solution to this we've seen. We've watched it develop to this level of, I think we're on our way, but I hear what you're saying. Yeah,
right.
It's a bear.
Yeah, I mean, the other concern too is like what Mr. I think Bailey had mentioned earlier, the detention part in particular, especially in the new development. I think that part was being removed from like, why are we removing that when we recognize, like, as we are continuing to build, we are getting more water that's coming downhill.
Can you answer that, Mr. Chandler?
Well, pieces of it, yes, sir. We did talk to Mr. Shepherd. I called him. I had a couple of conversations. I think we spent it. I'm looking at John's square on my screen. We spent about an hour on the phone, and I think the next day, Mr. Davis and Mr. Shepherd spent probably 90 minutes or more talking, sharing information, sharing ideas. Mr. Shepherd has worked closely with us as a member of the advisory committees, and so we did indeed reach out and spend a lot of time talking with him. I believe his comment to council on this was endorsement and recommending council approval. Right. The issue on that you mentioned, Councilor Leung, is actually on the code revisions that is coming up for second reading later today, not specific to the stormwater master plan.
Might be mixing it up, so sorry.
It's all stormwater. No worries.
Yeah, good luck on keeping it straight. Any other questions?
Thank you. In the past, when we've discussed this, there's been some concern about FEMA and floodplain insurance and whether we're in a floodplain area or not. And part of the council concern was the deeper we study this, the more we may expand the floodplain areas that people are going to have to buy insurance. And so I see that the way Mr. Davis talked about it was there's FEMA, and then we've done better, more complete modeling for what is going on right now in Salem based on our particular models, not FEMA looking at it from Washington, D.C. or whatever the regional office is. My question is, do our models show increase the floodplain or decrease the floodplain? And if that's the case, do our models control over FEMA with respect to the insurance and the percentage breaks people would get?
I'll answer that. Counselor, the FEMA data is quite old. Their models were done sometimes in the 70s, so it's based on old information. So this is state of the art. This is new. So the information is not necessarily larger or smaller. It's just more accurate. And that's the first thing. And the second thing is that FEMA has established some policies after Katrina. They've established some policies that require all levees to be ignored. And so if you have a railroad that holds water back, FEMA will remove that railroad. And in Salem, there's a few areas that we're pretty darn sure won't flood. And by removing those levees, then they'd have to buy flood insurance.
Yeah, that was in your report. And by removing, you mean taking them out of the equation. They're going to still be there.
Yes, but from the analysis, they will remove it. So all that said, that the maps are different, and so there's no question that we're going to be providing information as needed locally, and we have a process in our code in Chapter 601 that allows for interim flood hazard areas. So if we have data that we want to make sure people know and we can regulate. So if you're going to develop in an area like that, we will be able to do an interim flood hazard area so that somebody will make sure not to build in an area that might flood. And then eventually FEMA comes along and makes new maps, and FEMA makes those maps. And so that'll be down the road.
Okay.
FEMA will be making the maps based on the information we provided.
Partly, yes.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just, following on with that conversation, we've spoken on that at the Water Wastewater Task Force as well, and the implications of being in a FEMA map without the engineered stormwater control structures, and the fact that we would be aware if in fact those were going to take place to make sure we could notify Salem residents and businesses that they should probably buy this other type of flood insurance so that when this hits, there's not a serious negative financial impact to them. Just to drop back on a couple of different items, we can't design for every type of storm event that's happening in our city. We do the best we can, but in regards to retention, detention, my question, just for edification of the public, is there any type of development that can take place now in the city of Salem that does not require that they hold their stormwater to where it doesn't discharge any faster than if there was no development there?
I don't mean to mix the master plan with the code revision language, but in that code change, it is adding requirements to make more detention on site.
Right.
So that code change adds detention on site for more storms. So yes, there are with that code adoption, that would only make more water to be detained on site, less water downstream.
Just because there's been comments on that, so I just wanted to have clarification inside of this forum here.
If there's no further questions, I'm going to close the public hearing. Okay. Close public hearing. Councilor Hoy. You want to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was trying to find my mute button. I move we advance ordinance bill number 11-20, which amends Salem Stormwater Master Plan to first reading.
Second.
Second by Nanki.
I don't have anything to add.
We've had, yeah, okay. If the recorder would please call the roll, call the vote. So.
Counselor Anderson,
Aye.
Counselor Nanki,
Aye.
Counselor Leung,
Aye.
Counselor Osick,
Aye.
Counselor Hoy,
Aye.
Counselor Nordike,
Aye.
Counselor Lewis,
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser,
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay, motion passes. It moves to first reading. I'm going to open public hearing on the exemption from competitive bidding process for the Salem Public Works.
The City Council will now conduct a public hearing concerning exemption from competitive bidding process and authorization of an alternative contracting method for the Salem Public Works Operations Building Project. The hearing will begin with a staff presentation, and individuals testifying are limited to 3 minutes.
Good evening, everybody. This is Alan Dana with Public Works Engineering. Not sure if I got an introduction there or not. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Very good. Thank you. And hopefully my presentation is coming through as well. My objective tonight is to provide a quick overview of the Public Works Operations Building Project, talk about the design build alternate contracting method that we're proposing, and a bit more detail for the findings in support of using that method. I'll try to keep it brief because I know there's more business on the agenda tonight. I want to start just with the existing city shops complex, which shows up here on the right of this slide. For folks that don't or aren't familiar, it's just north of Oxford Street between 20th and 23rd Street, right south of Mission. And most folks who've been to the site, the biggest thing that you can comment on it is that most of the buildings there are 50 plus years old and definitely showing their age. The left-hand side shows the cover of a recently completed master plan for redevelopment of the site. We've been working on that for a few years now, and some of you may remember back in 2018, we held a council work session to review a draft of that document and tour the site. After that time, we got some news about buildings 2 and 14, which show up on the left-hand side of the site map here. And those two buildings really kind of make up what I call kind of like the nerve center for the site. That's where a lot of our critical functions for public works operations and parks are housed. Building 2 has the dispatch center for public works, our department operating center, where we stage operations for handling events like ice storms and wind storms. And similarly, Building 14 has similar facilities for critical parks operations components. And the news we got in those buildings was we already knew they were in end of useful life type conditions, but there was additional repairs required in the very near term to their roofs and other systems that really would cost more than those buildings were worth. And so that caused us to rethink how the master plan was phased and look for, with the first phase of the master plan, a replacement for those 2 workspaces. And so that's what shows up here on the right-hand side of the map, a new building that would provide that replacement in the first phase, along with some supporting improvements and a little bit of reorganization of the space there in terms of demolishing existing buildings and relocating some others. That in turn empties out, once the folks can move in there, empties out buildings 2 and 14, which they could then be demolished. And that gives us room to start working on long-term redevelopment plans for the site. And so skipping all the phasing, of which there's a lot of baby steps to the full improvement, this is the end vision for the site, where all of those old, small little shops buildings are eventually replaced with bigger, more modern, more flexible workspaces. We're improving vehicle and pedestrian circulation both in and around the site, improving traffic access to the site. and providing parking for all the vehicles that stage out of the site. You'll notice that the central building, the administrative building on the right-hand side, is bigger in the end result. And that could come from either expanding the building that we would build with this project, or possibly revising this to have a few small buildings in close proximity to each other. The idea here is this is a roadmap for us to redevelop the site over a period of many years as funding and time allow. So going back to the current project that we're talking about tonight, again, on the right-hand side of your map, it's proposed to be approximately 30,000 square foot building in 2 stories that, again, provides the workspace that's currently in buildings 2 and 14 with a modest amount of space for growth. It would also include parking facilities and supporting infrastructure for the site. The project is funded in the current 5-year capital improvement program for fiscal years 21 through 25, and the cash flow for it is spread out over the first 3 years in that plan for a total of $24.6 million that comes from utility rate funds. The project has a number of challenges that don't lend themselves well to the traditional way that Public Works bids projects, which is to issue a fully designed set of plans and take the lowest responsible bidder. So I want to kind of run down through those and then the way we're proposing to handle them. So a few things related to subsurface and the soil conditions out here, surprises that we might find when we start digging. As with other projects we've done recently here around town, there's always the potential for finding archaeology or cultural resource materials once we start digging that need to be protected and or mitigated for. Because of the use of the site over many, many years, contaminated soils or poor soils for building are also risks that we would face. And then many of you who've seen the site know it's really, really flat out there. And so managing stormwater and flooding, which is just subject to the previous public hearing, is also going to be a challenge on this site. And we know there's actually FEMA mapped floodway and floodplain through the site that will need to work within FEMA requirements to accommodate our development plans with that. A few other things just related to how we progress with the project. Time's of the essence here. We need to get those spaces replaced because we know those buildings aren't going to hold out for much longer. And in addition, the site's going to stay active for all public works operation. So we want to minimize the amount of time where there's potential conflict with the construction. And lastly, as is typical of many projects, but especially building projects like the ones we've been working on recently for the city, this is a once in a generation type project. And so we want to make sure that we do it right. We stretch our budget as far as we can while still providing a durable and good quality product. So all that leads us to proposing a design, build, delivery method. And in particular here, we're proposing to use the same method called progressive design build that we're using right now for the library improvement project, which has been very successful so far. And what design build means really is that we, the city, as the owner, have a single contract with the design build team that's usually led by the general contractor, who teams up and hires architects and other engineers to provide the design. And all that's done under a single contract with us. Once the construction scope is defined, then they'll bring on subcontractors to do quite a bit of that work. The benefits here are our team comes on at the same time, and we can start working immediately in a collaborative way to solve some of the challenges I just mentioned. It gives us a streamlined way to start working together and attacking those issues. And it also lets us start doing some early construction work even before the design's done. So I mentioned those challenges with subsurface conditions related, whether it's archaeology or poor soils or contamination and stormwater. As you know, construction in Oregon, especially digging construction, is best done in dry weather. And so we may not be done with the design next summer, but we can go out and start doing some of the excavation work early, exposing those challenges, resolving those challenges, and making sure they don't show up as harder hurdles when we're trying to build in wet weather. Again, that lets us hopefully achieve the project more quickly. I also wanted to highlight the opportunities for local participation. There's several general contractors and local architects that have the skill sets to work on design build project. So we think that gives us the biggest pool possible to compete for the job. And then once that design builder is hired, we as the city have visibility into their hiring process for subcontracting. So how they're going to bid that work, how they're engaging with our local subcontractors, whether that's concrete, painting, drywall, making sure that everybody's aware of the opportunity and got it on their radar to bid on our job and hopefully help us get the best possible pricing and value. And then lastly, I wanted to point out the term that gets thrown out quite a bit with these types of deliveries is guaranteed maximum price. And that what that really does is gives us a transparent budget process. We can use a tool called target value design, where our design builder team comes on, they know what our budget is, and we work together to flesh out the scope to meet that target value for the various components of the project. And that way they provide a guaranteed maximum price for the work towards the end of design that we know fits our scope and there's no surprises. Another way to show that, and some of you may have seen these slides before, is really to compare with our traditional design bid build or low bid process, how understanding on the project develops between the team members. So this graph is just meant to kind of show how common understanding of the scope and budget develops over time with a traditional low bid job. So time moves on the right-hand axis or the horizontal axis, and common understanding goes on the vertical axis. So we, the city, hire our architect in this method. They start working on design. They hire their sub-consultants. We go through the design services, but the contractor still has no idea what's in the scope until we put the project out for bid. They have a short amount of time to get familiar with the documents, assemble their bid, and they really don't have a full understanding until after we're locked into a contract with them. And that's the point where if there's gaps in the drawings, or we haven't fully communicated the design intent, those surprises can be difficult to overcome without having to scramble to rework the design and having costly delays. So the intent with design build here is, again, we hire that team and they start working on the design all together so that our contractor's in the loop and actually leading the effort for us to develop the scope in a way that meets our budget, so that common understanding comes early in the design process. And when we get to construction over on the right-hand side, everybody's on the same page, and that risk of gaps in the drawings or not understanding the design intent is vastly reduced. Lastly, I just wanted to include this to say, again, what we're really talking about here is a team approach that integrates us, the owner, with the contractor and the designers to be accountable to each other and work towards a common goal. We're not working all in our own silos, coming up with work products and then tossing it into the other silo and waiting for a response. I will say that with the library project using this method, we've seen great success, great teamwork, great collaboration, and really solved a lot of unique issues there. And I believe we'll have the same opportunity with this project. Lastly, just to review how the selection works once we go forward. So it's still a competitive selection process, even though it's not a low bid process. We would issue a request for proposals, or RFP, and evaluate those proposals to find a list of the top proposers that we would then invite in for an interview. And then the top combined score between the RFP evaluation and the interview would get the award for the job. The philosophy there is not like older or more traditional design build, is they're not coming to us with a fully cooked design solution. It's really just based on their experience with this method, with similar types of projects, what their team brings to the table, and how they can innovate to help us solve the project challenges. We'd be bringing on the builder, the general contractor, and the architect team all at that time. And considering factors besides their experience and qualifications, the price factors we would be considering include some of their fees and staffing. But as I mentioned, the guaranteed maximum price for the actual construction work would be developed later. Our process going forward, assuming we are approved this evening, we have an RFP drafted that we hope to issue within the next several days so that we can get our design build team selected in December before the holidays. We could start work then after the first of the year, and that would go on through early 2022. But again, as I mentioned, trying to take advantage of the opportunity to do some early site work and get ready for that construction and eliminate project risks next summer. Building construction itself could then start in late winter, early spring of 2022, finishing up around or mid 2023, and then with some time to get organized and move in, hopefully grand opening of that new building sometime next summer. One last thing I'd like to mention, we have an owner's representative firm called Compass Project Solutions on the job, who's led by Ricardo Besserell. Several of you may remember him from the police station project. He's helped us greatly through the challenges of that project, and we're excited to have him on board for this one as well. He is on the call tonight, just in case there's any questions I can't answer. Lastly, I just wanted to recap our findings. We think we're recommending approval tonight. The method here won't encourage favoritism or diminish competition for the award of this project, and we believe there'll be substantial cost savings and other benefits for the public by using the design build method. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Alan. We don't have any members of the public signed up, so here's your opportunity to ask any questions. Or Mr. Fernandez. Okay, very good. If there are no questions, I'm going to close this public hearing. Councilor Hoy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move City Council adopt resolution number 2020-43 in support of an exemption from the competitive bid process and use a design build contracting method for the Salem Public Works Operations Building Project.
Second.
By Kaiser. Any discussion? Good. The recorder, please call a roll.
Counselor Nanki.
Aye.
Counselor Leung.
Aye.
Counselor Osick.
Aye.
Counselor Hoy. Counselor Nordijk.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. I will move on to special orders of business. This is a council deliberation only. We're not taking public comment or testimony. I'm going to have Mr. Atchison kind of set the stage here for what we're up to. Is that correct, Mr. Atchison?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like an opportunity for city councilors to declare any conflicts of interest on the matter.
Councilor Hoy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to declare a potential conflict of interest in this case. A potential conflict of interest occurs when the effect of the official action, decision, or recommendation could have a private financial impact. As it relates to this case, I am a Costco member and have been so since 1992. This decision could have a private financial impact. So I declare a potential conflict of interest, and I invite any of my colleagues who are similarly situated to do the same.
I'll be joining Councilor Hoy in this potential. Councilor Anderson?
Thank you. I will join too. I was at Costco over the weekend.
Ah, so it's an immediate. Okay. Anyone else? A Costco member? Councilor Kaiser?
Thanks. I will also join that. I'm a Costco member. I also want to, for the record, say that I didn't participate in the original hearing in December of 2018, but I have reviewed the record in this matter and I am prepared to participate.
Councilor Leon?
I would like to echo Councilor Kaiser in that I am a Costco member and that I wasn't a city councilor in 2018 when this initial decision was made, but I did review the materials and I am prepared to discuss today.
Thank you. Councilor Lewis?
Yes, I too am a Costco member. What else can I say?
Mr. Mayor, I am too a Costco member. I participated in the public hearing previously and participated in the original land use decision a very long time ago.
Councilor Nordyke, do you want to be a member too?
You know, I am not a member of Costco.
Oh,
and
right.
I'm not a member of Costco. I haven't been in a Costco in years. So no, I can't think of any reason to declare a potential or actual conflict at this time.
Councilor Nordyke, Dan Atchison, City Attorney again. Have you also reviewed the record and able to participate since you didn't participate in 2018?
Yes, I am.
Thank you.
And that's correct. I was not a part of the 2018 decision. I'm the new kid on the block around here.
Matt Ossig. You want to join in this?
No, I haven't been a member for several years, so.
Okay, very good. Okay, we've got the whole list. Is that enough, Mr. Atchison?
Thank you, Mayor. That's fine. At this point, I'm going to turn over the introduction of the presentation to Aaron Panko from the Planning Division, and he'll start off, and then I will have a few things to say after he gets started.
Thank you. Good evening. Hopefully you guys can all see my screen here.
Yes.
So my name is Aaron Panko with the Planning Division, and this is a remand of site plan review and driveway approach permit, case number SPR DAP 18-15 for property at the 2500 block of Boone Road Southeast. I'd like to enter into the record the staff report, including its attachments and this presentation, and then I'll pass this back over to Dan real quick.
Thank you, Aaron. So I wanted to talk about a few things. First, I want to give you a short chronology of the application and where it started. So back in 2006, 2007, the applicant Pac Trust submitted an application for a comp plan change and zone change from residential agriculture and residential to commercial designation and zoning. The 2007 City Council approved that decision or approved that application with several conditions of approval. There were several conditions related to transportation improvements. When an applicant applies for a comprehensive plan change from a less intensive zone such as residential to a more intensive zone such as commercial, the city has an opportunity to look at traffic impacts caused by that increased intensity. And the applicant is required to mitigate those impacts. And what the staff does during the analysis, it looks at a reasonable worst case scenario of what potential uses could go to the site. So in 2007, when the City Council approved the application, it did so and imposed conditions of approval that were meant to mitigate traffic impacts based on a reasonable worst case scenario of that commercial zoning. In addition to that, the 2007 decision also imposed condition 14, which limited the development of the site to a shopping center of up to 300,000 square feet of gross leasable area. In 2012, the site was developed with the Salem Clinic and related street improvements. And then in 2013, the city had some federal money and some local money to help improve Kuebler Boulevard. At that point, the city did not have sufficient funds to complete the project, so it went to Pac Trust and asked them to help participate in that by paying money over to the city to complete Kuebler Boulevard. Kuebler Boulevard and other associated improvements were part of the conditions of approval in 2007. At that point in 2013, Pac Trust wasn't obligated to complete them. Their obligation came when they developed the site. So they front loaded this by paying money to the city to get those improvements done. In 2018, as you're aware, Pac Trust submitted their application for site plan approval. And then that application was recommended for approval or approved by the planning administrator and then appealed to council. Council denied the application based on two bases. The first basis was that the proposed Costco for the site was not allowed under the 2007 decision. The other basis was that the applicant had not shown it was necessary to remove the significant white oaks that were on the site. The Land Use Board of Appeals reviewed the application and remanded it back to the city after it was reviewed by the Court of Appeals, which affirmed LUBA. LUBA told us that the 300,000 gross leasable area shopping center includes a Costco, which is a permitted use on the site. However, LUBA did agree with the city that the applicant didn't prove it was necessary to remove the trees. The LUBA also said that the city did not address a vested rights argument that was brought by the applicant, and on remand, the city needed to address it. So on remand, on June 16th, the applicant submitted a request that we take up the application on remand, and that sort of decision is subject to a 120-day decision deadline. The city, in consultation with the applicant, provided an extended comment period. We provided a 28-day period for any party to submit any evidence or testimony, and then a 15-day rebuttal period, which any party could submit argument in response to the evidence and testimony that was originally submitted, and then a final 28-day period for the applicant to submit written final argument. So for tonight, there is no public comment or applicant testimony allowed. The record is closed. You have the complete record before you. Staff may answer questions during your deliberations, but staff's answers must be contained or must be constrained to facts that are in the record. We can't go outside the record to answer your question. To talk a little bit about the vested rights argument. Essentially, it's an equitable legal theory where the applicant has a right to develop what was approved in 2007 because of substantial investments in the development that was made in reliance on that 2007 approval. The city retained Jeff Condit, who's a land use lawyer with Miller Nash, to provide a legal opinion. That legal opinion is attachment 6 to your staff report. The opinion regarding the vested rights argument. Mr. Condit concluded that essentially the applicant is correct. They do have a vested right to what was approved in 2007. In addition, the law of the case doctrine, as it applies to land use decisions, states essentially that applicants, once they've been approved for a particular development, the city cannot reverse that approval. So as Mr. Condit said, the applicant has a vested right to what was approved in 2007. And what was approved in 2007 was a shopping center development up to 300,000 square feet. And as Luba told us, a Costco or other shopping center use is allowed. The city can't impose additional traffic mitigation requirements because of that vested right, because they've invested not only $3 million in traffic improvements, but as well as other monies to further develop the site. At this point, the traffic mitigation measures were imposed in 2007. And the city can't go back and amend those conditions or add to those conditions as far as mitigating off-site traffic. The city can apply the site plan review criteria, but those criteria can't be imposed to deny the application. It can only condition the application. And as far as those conditions can be applied, they can't be applied to reduce the square footage that the applicants have requested or otherwise limit the otherwise permitted uses. This is going to relate to your review of the tree regulations as they apply to the property. We can apply those regulations, however, we can't apply them in such a way as it's going to deny the application. We can only condition the application, and those conditions can't reduce the square footage or otherwise limit what would be a permitted use. With that, I'll turn it back to Aaron. And if you have any questions along the way, feel free to ask any of us.
All right, thanks, Dan. So this is a vicinity map of the subject property. The property is approximately 24 acres in size. The property has frontage along Kuebler Boulevard, which is designated as a parkway in the Salem Transportation System Plan. The property also has frontage along Boone Road, southeast to the south, and then 27th Avenue to the east. Those streets are designated as collector streets. And then to the west is Battle Creek Road. This is designated as a minor arterial. This is an aerial photo taken from 2018 that shows the subject property here. There are some existing trees near the southern portion of the site. And there's some existing residential uses that are to the south of Boone Road. North of the parkway, there's a residential zoning that's occupied by an existing church. And this is a zoning map for the property. Property is zone CR, retail commercial. The zoning to the south is a combination of RA zoning, residential agriculture, and RS, which is single family residential. Across from 27th is more RA zoning. And then north of Kuebler is RA zoning as well. On the other side of Battle Creek Road is some multifamily residential zoning. And then there's a neighborhood commercial zone up at the intersection of Kuebler and Battle Creek Road. And this slide here, it shows the overall site plan with the proposed Costco building on the south side of the site, adjacent to Boone Road. The retail fueling station is at the northeast corner of the site of the property near the intersection of Kuebler and 27th. And then there's 4 new retail buildings that are proposed up along Kuebler Boulevard. There's 2 existing medical office buildings at the southeast corner of the property. The conditions of approval from the comprehensive plan change and zone change, case number 0606, require that the property be developed as a shopping center with a maximum of 299,000 square feet of gross leasable area. The proposed new buildings total 189,550 square feet of floor area. And if you include the existing medical office buildings at the southwest corner of the site, the total floor area for the shopping center is 227,000 square feet in size. This is a photo taken of the property. This is from Kuebler looking southeast towards the site. You can see Salem Clinic is here in the background, and we're looking at the existing grove of trees near the south side of the site. And this is a photo taken from Boone Road looking north to the site, and again, those trees. So in October of 2018, the planning administrator approved the site plan review decision for development of the Kuebler Gateway Shopping Center. The planning administrator decision was appealed by surrounding neighbors, and the city council voted to hear the appeal. In December of 2018, after conducting a public hearing and receiving testimony, the city council voted to deny the site plan review and a driveway approach permit application. The city council decision was appealed to the Land Use Board of Appeals, or LUBA, and in August of 2019, LUBA remanded the case to the city for additional consideration. In October of 2019, LUBA's decision was appealed to the Oregon Court of Appeals, who in February of 2020 affirmed LUBA's decision. In June of 2020, the applicant submitted a request for remand that included new materials for the city council to consider. So due to the tremendous public interest surrounding this case, an extended opportunity for public review and comment was provided. The initial comment period was from July 1st through July 28th, followed by an additional 2-week-long public rebuttal period. All comments that were received for the request for remand are attached to the city council staff report, and they are made available to on the city's website. This slide just shows a summary of some of the major themes that we received in that testimony. Regarding traffic, a traffic impact analysis, or TIA, was required with the site plan review application for the proposed development. Kittleson and Associates, who is the applicant's representative, has provided a TIA for the proposed development. A separate traffic consulting business, Greenlight Engineering, has provided a memo on behalf of the appellants asserting that the applicant's TIA is flawed.
The TIA submitted by Kittleson and Associates has been reviewed by city staff and was found to use the most accurate information available and provides the most appropriate and conservative analysis for traffic impact. In addition, the responses provided by Kittleson and Associates accurately and appropriately address each of the assertions raised by Greenlight Engineering and the neighbors. Oregon white oaks that are greater than 24 inches in diameter are classified as significant trees and are protected under the Salem Revised Code, Chapter 808. There are 8 significant trees located in a grove along the southern portion of the property. The proposed site layout places the proposed building footprint for the Costco building in conflict with this grove. The applicant's original plan was to remove these significant trees. However, the applicant has modified their development plan to include the relocation and transplanting of each of the 8 significant trees to an open space area on the east end of the property. The applicant is making 2 arguments with respect to the significant trees. The first is that for commercial and industrial development, the code allows removal of significant trees when it's necessary for the proposed development. City staff is interpreting the term necessary for this purpose as it's not possible to develop the site to an allowable floor area in compliance with all applicable zoning standards, which would include setbacks and off-street parking requirements. The applicant indicates that the proposed layout, which you see here, best minimizes potential impacts to the residential neighborhood, allowing for efficient traffic flow to the site. Further, the applicant explains that it's not possible to develop a shopping center on the site with a building arrangement and off-street parking area layout meeting code requirements in a way that also preserves the significant trees. And they provided several alternative plans indicating that it's not possible. The first alternative plan is the northwest option. This alternative plan shows the proposed Costco building moved to the northwest corner of the subject property. The fueling station has been moved to the southeast corner, and the retail building is moved along 27th. This option retains all 8 of the significant trees. However, the plan fails to meet development standards of the Salem Revised Code, including providing 65 fewer spaces, parking spaces, than are required by code, and it cannot be approved as proposed. The second alternative here is the northeast option, which shows the proposed Costco building moved to the northeast corner of the site. The retail fueling station is moved to the southwest corner next to Boone Road, and then the retail building is moved to the north end of the site. This alternative fails to comply with the minimum parking requirements. It removes the proposed roundabout on 27th Avenue. It's in conflict with the building footprint here. The roundabout on 27th provides the most efficient traffic flow into and out of the site. This alternative would instead require more driveways and more traffic along Boone Road. The next option here is the southeast option 1, which shows the proposed Costco building moved to the southeast corner of the property. The fueling station moved to the northwest, and the retail building moved to the northeast. This alternative fails to comply, again, with the site plan review approval criteria. It results in the removal of 5 of the significant trees and removes the proposed roundabout on 27th Avenue. Southeast option 2 is similar to the previous alternative. This alternative results in the removal of 1 significant tree, and that tree is in relatively good health. It removes the proposed roundabout on 27th Avenue and provides inefficient vehicle and pedestrian circulation. So it fails to comply with the site plan review approval criteria. And finally, the southwest option shows the proposed Costco building on the west side of the site. The fuel station is up at the northeast corner. The retail building here is along the north. This plan results in the removal of 6 of the significant trees, provides poor connectivity to the western portion of the development site, and fails to comply with the site plan review approval criteria. So based on the alternatives analysis here, the applicant indicates that it's necessary to remove the significant trees in order to develop the property. And staff concurs that it's necessary, and therefore the exemption provided in Chapter 808 applies to this application. The second argument that the applicant is making is that even though they qualify for the exemption and are not required to preserve the significant trees, the proposal to transplant each of the significant trees to a new location on the property does not meet the definition of removal. So by code, tree removal means to cut down a tree or remove 30% or more of the crown, trunk, or root system of the tree, or to damage a tree so as to cause the tree to decline or die. The term removal includes, but it's not limited to, topping, damage inflicted upon a root system, change of natural grade due to unapproved excavation or filling, or unapproved alteration of the natural physical conditions. The applicant's arborist has provided a detailed report which outlines the steps that will be taken at each step of the transplanting process to ensure that the critical root system is protected and preserved. As stated by the applicant, the proposal to transplant the 8 significant trees will not result in cutting down, removal of more than 30% of the crown or root system, and will not result in damage to the trees so as to cause them to decline or die. With the recommended condition of approval, the proposed transplanting activity does not result in the removal of any tree. While it's unknown if all 8 significant trees will survive after being transplanted, the applicant has described a process that they will take to ensure that they will not be inflicting damage to the trees that will cause it to decline or die. The act of transplanting in and of itself is not considered tree removal as defined in Chapter 808. Therefore, with no significant trees proposed for removal, the applicant's request complies with the requirements of Chapter 808. The original decision of the planning administrator included 17 conditions of approval. 8 of them are related to transportation and utility infrastructure improvements. 7 conditions relate to development of the site, including development of the parking lot, a minimum landscape requirement, pedestrian access requirements. A condition of approval requires new Oregon white oaks to be incorporated into the landscape plan. And then 2 conditions relate to the completion of some required improvements from previous land use decisions. So staff recommends that the City Council approve the site plan review and driveway approach permit application subject to the original conditions of approval and then proposed condition 18 in the staff report. And that concludes my presentation.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, at this juncture, we can go ahead and entertain a motion, and then you can ask questions of staff during deliberations.
Councilor Hoy.
Mr. Mayor, I move City Council approve the Class 3 site plan review and Class 2 driveway approach permit case number SRP-DAP 18-15 for development of the Kuebler Gateway Shopping Center, including Costco, a retail fueling station, and 4 new retail shell buildings.
Second.
Second by Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a difficult decision. In 2007, the City Council set in motion the circumstances that remain intact today. A shopping center was approved, abutting a neighborhood that is going to have significant impact on the area, drawing people in their cars from a wide geographic area, as the hundreds of emails we've received over the past few years have shown. We attempted to mitigate the impact of this development in 2018, but LUBA in 2019 determined that we were wrong. And the Court of Appeals affirmed LUBA's ruling, saying that we were wrong. So as much as I'd like to be able to, again, listen to the neighbors and not approve this so-called shopping center, the die was cast in 2007, and we have no flexibility to change it now. So I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Hoy that this is a difficult decision. I would go even further.
Could you get close? I can't hear.
I would agree that this is a difficult position, and I would also go further and say it's a very painful decision for me to make. I was one of the original opponents of this, and I argued basically it's a regional shopping center, not a community shopping center. I argued that the traffic issues, the TIA was not was too severe, and I argued that the white oak trees couldn't be taken down. And that went to LUBA, and LUBA said we were wrong. That was appealed to the Court of Appeals, and the Court.
Don't take it personally, okay?
Yeah. The Court of Appeals said we were wrong again. They affirmed LUBA. I'm a lawyer. I understand what happens when you get mandates from higher courts. I also understand what vested rights are. I also understand estoppel, but I'm not going to get into that with you. But I will tell you that I had a long conversation today with the approval of the city attorney with Jeff Condit, an attorney I happen to know who filed the memorandum that said there are vested rights and that we can't really protect the trees. And you know, he's our attorney. So for this purpose, he's a staff person, so I can talk to him. And if we don't listen to the advice of our attorneys, we shouldn't be hiring attorneys. I mean, I like it when my clients listen to my advice. So on grounds that aren't within the area of our decision-making, the UBG issues, we're right out at the edge of the UGB, urban growth boundary, and I can see that that's going to put pressure to expand it at some point. General urban sprawl issues, all the more car traffic is going to have to go out there, mostly single occupancy vehicles, increase in traffic, all that stuff would give me reasons to oppose it, except for that, what we've been told by our attorneys and by LUBA and by the Court of Appeals. So I could potentially make an argument about what is tree removal. Is it removal from the site? Is it removal from where they are in the ground right now, or is it removal from the entire side of the development? But even if I can make that argument, it butts up again against the vested interest argument that they cannot build the development and meet the requirements if they leave the trees in, which means it's necessary to remove no matter what your definition of removal is. So I do want to, I'm happy that they have volunteered to keep the trees on the site. And that's, in my view, that's the best we can do. So I will be reluctantly supporting the motion with the understanding that that's what we have to do.
Thank you, Councilor. Councilor Kaiser.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilor Hoy, Councilor Anderson. I wasn't part of the original deliberations on this, but had I been, I would have voted the way that the council majority did. It's unfortunate that this is happening with a big box store literally across the street from a neighborhood. It's definitely not good planning. It's one of those situations where in 2007, the council at that time essentially made a decision that ties our hands right now. And we're essentially forced to approve this because of everything that Councilor Anderson just said. That being said, it doesn't make it good. Does not make good planning. I don't believe in having Costco-sized stores across the street from where people live is good planning. And what should be there is actually a community shopping center of small businesses, not national conglomerates. So I'm very disappointed, but at the same time understand we're in a position where we're essentially being forced to approve this. And so I'll be supporting the motion.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? Councilor Leon.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I know we're supposed to stay within the parameters that we were restricted to. There's just a few things I just want to make a note of. And it's kind of echoes what some of the other councilors have mentioned. I mean, this started in 2007. It's now 2020. That's a period of 13 years. 13 years we've seen significant change within this particular area. Like thinking about livability, we have a lot more housing in the area. We have a memory care facility, and I believe a retirement independent living facility in place as well. Taking that into consideration, I mean, what do we define as what fits a neighborhood? Are we considering the community impact? I mean, those are the things that we have to think about, especially as we are doing this. And it's very unfortunate that we have a box that's coming in versus actually a neighborhood friendly type mall or space for people to actually go to. I mean, we talk about the built environment and what we have built within the space. I mean, when we look at, for example, what we define as a food desert, I mean, we were looking at maybe like whether it would be actually like maybe little markets there or even like smaller stores that people could shop at, like an actual family friendly oriented neighborhood area. And by having a Costco come in there, we're pretty much destroying that as a possible opportunity. Second of which, I'm very concerned about the trees. Like though those trees are 100+ years old. And I do see that Costco is going to consider transplanting trees, but I mean, I've never seen trees of that nature be transplanted and then still survive. And I mean, when we think about Salem, Salem is supposed to be tree city designation. And we are continuing to see the number of trees within our area be lost, either being removed for pest reasons or other reasons for removal because we're having exemptions. And I'm concerned what this means for our tree canopy and what it's going to look like, especially as we move forward. I mean, 8 trees doesn't sound like a lot, but considering that these are significant white oak trees, so they're more important than ever to try and save whenever we can. And I'm really concerned about what this means for us as a city, especially if we're not taking that into consideration. And, you know, I can't vote on this and say yes. I'm going to have to vote no on this.
Thank you, Councilor. Anyone else? All right. Councilor Nanke.
Councilor Nordyke has had her hand up for several times here if you're not able to see her. So I'll
Sorry, Councilor Nordyke, did you want to speak?
Yes, I did. Thank you. So I just wanted to reiterate a couple of points. First of all, I want to make sure the entire community understands there's a reason that we have been tight-lipped about this in public. And that's because legally we cannot discuss it in public because we have very express rules for when and how we can discuss this subject. And even after tonight's meeting, there are ongoing appeals, as I understand it. So I still will not be free to speak outside the context of this meeting. So I just want to make sure that folks understand that when we as a council are careful in our remarks, it's because of the certain legal parameters that surround ex parte contact, when you can talk, when you can't talk, what you can base your information on. So I have to get my legal caveats out of the way so that people understand we're not ignoring it and that we're fully aware of the community concerns. And I share in many of those community concerns. Next, I also want to make clear that I parachuted into City Council last November, had nothing to do with council in 2007. I think I was in grad school in that time frame. Yes, I was. I was in grad school at that time. I definitely wasn't on council at the time, nor was I on council when this came back in 2018. So being new to this and parachuting into the conversation, I particularly find my hands tied. As I understand it from the materials before us, back in 2007, a plan was approved. And then this company started making plans because of the approval that was made by council back at the time. And now today, even though it's been remanded from the Land Use Board of Appeals, it's been remanded to us with a very limited decision. We cannot revisit the conditions of approval that were originally imposed when the plan was approved back in 2007. We cannot revisit the conditions regarding the off-site transportation improvements that were made in 2007. We cannot deny the shopping center outright because it is a permitted use. We cannot reduce the size of the shopping mall because it is within the size limits vested by that 2007 decision. So I appreciate the efforts that the developer is making to try and save the trees. As I understand it, their plan allows for planting trees as well. I also appreciate the fact that they have invested some money in improving the transportation infrastructure in the surrounding area to help mitigate the impacts of this considerable change in the neighborhood. But with all that being said, it's a difficult decision, but not one in which we have free reign to undo what was done years and years ago. This is why, folks, it's important to pay attention to who your city councilors are, because we all make zoning decisions from time to time, and those zoning decisions can have ripple effects decades into the future. And it can bind the hands of future city councilors, future mayors, future city staff, future neighbors. So this is why it's important to pay attention to who you put in office. Thanks.
Councilor Nanki.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And in response to those comments, back in 2007, council never intended for Costco necessarily to go into this location. I know there was concerns with no alternative locations to build a certain development of this nature, and then we had the recession take place. The traffic impacts were addressed at the time. The tree issue has been interesting over the years, because as we've moved through the years, and I'm still not convinced that the developer needs to relocate to be considered a non-removal there. We've saved a significant amount of trees out at the old Panasonic site and took it off of the development rolls. But when we talked about these early on, industrial or large commercial projects, it's very difficult to build those types of facilities with the required parking to not impact trees. That being said, if we're talking truly canopy, a white oak takes numerous years to mature versus some other trees. I commend the developer in attempting to relocate these. Now, I'll be anxiously watching to see how they fare. But if we're truly just interested in canopy, there would be ways to increase that canopy faster than attempting to relocate these trees based on their potential mortality as well. Again, the remand from LUBA is very narrow. Criteria is always land use, and a lot of people don't understand that we have boundaries upon us. And I will be supporting the motion tonight. And it's not like we're approving it and not being aware of the impacts that's going to put on our citizens. And again, as we move forward in time, one must, as a counselor or as a citizen in comments to their counselor, be very cognizant about not necessarily what is decisions are made at the time, but how they can actually move over the years based on circumstances that were beyond the control or vision of what's expected based on a certain development at a certain time.
Anyone else? I had the chance in 2007 to vote against the underlying zone change for this. I thought this was a bad zoning idea. There was no Costco. There was none of the apparently attendant issues that have developed opposition to this. I just thought it was a bad use of the land at that particular location. I wasn't allowed to vote against it on the city council when the underlying zoning decision came to it because I had voted no on it once before. It was so I found myself confined then. But I'll tell you, the decision the council made to try to reverse what had occurred, I think, was a mistake. And I said so at our meeting at that time. I think we did have a very confined choice. I think we still do have a very confined choice here. Costco or no Costco, I kind of think it's too bad to talk about them in any way other than they're going to be hopefully a very good neighbor out there. And there is a retail center that hopefully will meet some of the neighborhood retail ideas, but the current location for Costco has proven increasingly unworkable, as we could tell just by the number of counselors who are members of Costco. There's a tremendous amount of membership and use of that particular site. So I'm pleased. It sounds like we will just move ahead on this. So unless there's further comment, I'm going to call for a vote.
Counselor Leung.
Nay.
Counselor Ossick. Counselor Ossick. Aye. Counselor Hoy. I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Aye.
Thank you. Counselor Nordijk.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Nanki.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Motion passes.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add something.
Yes.
So at this point, we're going to draft a decision with findings, and we're going to try to get that back to you as soon as possible. However, it probably will not happen on October 12th. We're going to work with the applicant to provide an extension to the 120-day decision deadline. But at this time, as Councilor Nordijk mentioned, the ex parte rule still applies. So please try to avoid ex parte contacts, communications regarding the substance of the application. And if you have any questions along the way, please just contact me or the planning division.
Okay. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Atchison, for your work on this. Okay, information reports. Anybody got anything here? Yes, Councilor Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I already commended the Planning Commission on the report. I specifically want to say I thought they did an excellent job on the pedestrian paths, on the bikeways and bike parking, and on the multifamily development. I think those are all things that move forward very nicely. Public Works action plan, I like that too. I specifically like their goals in transportation, especially number 1 and number 5, and their parks and recreation, especially number 2, which relates to illegal camping and how we deal with that. And that relates to some of the conversations we had earlier. I will note that though, we are moving forward with the climate action plan, and some of that will affect Public Works in what they do. So it sure seems to me that at some point, we're going to have to integrate the climate action plan with Public Works plan and potentially even with the flood plan, the master flood plan we talked about, but all of the climate action plan, all of the other all of the other city plans are going to be impacted by what we come up with the climate action plan. So I just want to note that's going to be taking place.
Okay. Very good. Anyone else? All right, let's go to first readings.
Ordinance Bill number 1120, an ordinance relating to amending the Stormwater Master Plan, a component of the Salem Area Comprehensive Plan, and amending Salem Revised Code 64.005.
Roy?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I move we advance Ordinance Bill number 11-20, which amends Salem Stormwater Master Plan to second reading.
Second.
Second by Lewis. Talk about this? No. Okay. The recorder would, I'm sorry, Councilor Hoyt, did you want to say anything? No, okay.
No.
The recorder would please call a roll.
Counselor Ossick?
Aye.
Counselor Hoy?
Try it again.
Aye.
Counselor Nordijk?
Aye.
Counselor Lewis?
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser?
Aye.
Counselor Anderson?
Aye.
Counselor Nanki?
I'll do Councilor Hoyt.
Aye.
Counselor Leung?
Aye.
Mayor Bennett?
Aye. Motion passes. Okay. And Second reading.
Engrossed ordinance bill number 820, an ordinance relating to stormwater and floodplain overlay zone, amending SRC 70.005, 71.090, 71.095, and 601.070. Counselor Hoy.
Aye.
Counselor Nordike.
Aye.
Counselor Lewis.
Aye.
Counselor Kaiser.
Aye.
Counselor Anderson.
Aye.
Counselor Nanki.
Aye.
Counselor Leung.
Hey.
Counselor Ossick.
Aye.
Mayor Bennett.
Aye. Okay. Motion passes. I have no further public comments, so we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Good night, everybody.
Night.